Got a special guest coming in this evening. I've got the Governor of Mississippi, Phil Bryant, who'll be coming in within the next half an hour, and you'll find out what a state governor in the USA does and how he, as a Trump supporter, indeed the man that put me on the stage with Trump in Mississippi, thinks Trump is doing 100 days in to being the US president. But today, on the campaign trail, well, the Labour Party are talking about the health service. They're talking about an extra £37 billion that they're going to pump in. But the Prime Minister is engaged directly in the battle for working class voters. Yes, that's right. A Conservative Prime Minister is battling for working class voters. And just think about this. By tradition, the working classes voted Labour in their droves. Mrs Thatcher in the 80s made some inroads. The surge in UKIP from 2012 onwards was basically predominantly through working class voters, and now the Tory party are making a direct pitch. They're saying they will protect and extend workers' rights. They're making a very big issue of that. And I just wonder, who do you think now truly represents working class voters? Do the old arguments of left and right mean anything anymore? So to get involved, perhaps you think, no, of course it's still the Labour Party that truly represents the working classes. You can call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think, no. The game has changed. Skilled workers and semi-skilled workers, production line workers, it's the Tories that now speak their language. Well, if so, text me on 84850. Or maybe you think it's UKIP or somebody else that represents working class voters, in which case, using the hashtag Farage and LBC, tweet at LBC. And of course, you can watch the show live. Just go to LBC's Facebook page now. Grace in Ealing. Grace, tell me, who now represents working class voters?
Labour.
Yep.
I think that it's difficult for us to discern from what politicians are saying at the moment what they're actually most likely to do. But I think that the fact that Labour came out with a policy saying that they wanted to increase the minimum wage to £10 weeks ago, and that they want to raise money for public services by taxing the very, very wealthiest, demonstrates that they are most genuine in their wanting to share out what we have more equally. And I don't trust that the Tories are actually serious about sticking up for working class voters. I think that a lot of what the Tories say is just talk.
Grace, does increasing taxes, or perhaps going back to super taxes on the wealthy, does that directly help working class people?
If the money's spent sensibly in the public sector, then it should do. Of course, it's far more complex than I can easily explain all that I know about. But I think that if money comes in from the very wealthiest and is shared out amongst the people that most need it, and spent on things like the NHS and providing meals for school children, I think that is much more in line with what's fair and with what working class voters should be in support of than with Tory policies.
Grace, I completely understand that for working class voters, the NHS, schooling, all these things are very, very important. But what I suspect is even more important to them is their job, their income. And OK, yes, Labour want to put the minimum wage up, but actually the Tory party in government have made some big promises on the minimum wage. Isn't the real issue, isn't the real disaffection of working class voters with the Labour Party, and the reason a lot of them came to UKIP and maybe now are going to the Tories, isn't it down to immigration? Wasn't it open door immigration that drove people's wages down, so that from 2008 until now, in real terms, skilled and semi-skilled workers saw their income fall by 10% in real terms?
I read today that Jeremy Corbyn has said that he will stop free movement when we leave the EU.
Really?
I think that the reality is that Jeremy Corbyn's not made strongly anti-immigration statements that some working class people might like to hear, because ultimately Jeremy Corbyn is deeply concerned about human beings, and he doesn't want to just penalise people that are desperate for a better life. And I'm not saying that we should just let in everyone, but I think that Jeremy Corbyn wants to find solutions that will be able to provide the best lifestyle and support for as many human beings as possible.
Well, that's fine, Grace. That's fine. But my contention is that working class voters in this country care about immigration more than any other issue, because that is what's affected their jobs, their income, their communities. But Grace, I thank you for your call, and I appeal to anybody that disagrees disagrees with that view. Tell me I'm wrong. Call me on 0345 6060 973. Jonathan in Norway. Hello there.
God bless you. Hello. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, I think Labour do speak for the working classes. Interesting thing, though, is that didn't Blair's government almost get rid of the working classes and turn lots of them into middle classes or lower middle classes? So how do we actually define the working classes now?
Well,
there is another thing which is interesting. I think people who used to vote Conservative are now finding their own living standards dropping. They might be doing okay as pensioners,
Yep.
but ever since the financial crash of 2008, their investments are absolutely useless. So I think there's quite a few people who used to be Conservatives are now thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not that far off from being poor.
Well,
And
because,
I think
no, I mean, I get that, Jonathan. I mean, how do we define it? Well, C2s are skilled workers, Ds and Es
Right.
are the semi-skilled,
Yeah.
the unskilled and the unemployed. But I agree with you. I think the traditional definition of working class has changed completely, hasn't it?
Yeah. Also, this is a bit off topic. Can I give you a suggestion?
Yeah, go on.
Listen, when we lose all our MEPs,
Yes.
there's going to be loads of British people in Europe. Who's going to speak for them? Because we're not going to have any MEPs. And I know you've got a few fans in Denmark. Now, your Danish is probably pants, all right?
Right,
Your
so-
Danish is probably shocking. So is there any chance that you could get a job as an MEP for one of the Eurosceptic parties? Because I tell you what, it would be dead funny. And not only that, I can imagine that you would also make some very useful contributions to the debate.
Well, Jonathan,
Even if
my
people don't
Danish
agree
is
with you.
really poor. I would need to start night school now. I've even been criticised because my French isn't very good. Jonathan, who will speak?
You can see where I'm coming from.
Well, I can, but actually, once we've left, haven't we?
Well, yeah, this interesting thing, as far as there's supposedly 560,000 Brits between the ages of 30 and 64 who were working in the EU. Now, I'm just wondering what they're going to do if they come back. There's another 180,000 who are actually effectively pensioners. I'm thinking,
Jonathan,
if they come back, what's the
Jonathan,
NHS going to be like? Yeah.
None of this is going to happen. You know, our pensioners who are living in Brittany or living in the Costa del Sol, you know, if they were to leave those countries, I hate to think what would happen to the economy of southern Spain. None of it, Jonathan, is going to happen. They're all just ridiculous scare stories.
But are they more of a burden on the Spanish health? I mean, I don't know.
No, Jonathan, what happens is, if they're treated by the Spanish authorities then send a bill to the UK government who pay that bill. A pity, isn't it, that so many of the EU workers that are in Britain, when it comes to their bills being paid, we don't seem to get the money.
Or there's another one, which is, this is something you made also as well. You'll probably know about this, is the number of Brits who are working, paying national insurance outside of the UK, in the EU, but having to come back to the UK because they are resident for tax purposes in the country, in the EU, where they're working and paying tax, but they don't live there for the purposes of receiving anything in return for the contributions. And you'll know.
I know. And Jonathan, you're very naughty, because you've taken me completely off topic, but I love you. It's a great phone call. I get on text. I must say that I was surprised with Mrs May, and I believe that the Tories represent us, the working classes, says Chris Edmond from Northern Ireland. On Twitter, how can people think of Labour as the Workers' Party? Their unrestricted open immigration policy has kept wages down for 10 years, says Ant. Well, Ant, that is my view. That is what I think. Yes, of course, working class people care about public services, but they care about jobs and income. And in the case of skilled and semi-skilled workers, they've been undercut over the last few years. That, folks, is what I think. If you disagree, call me and tell me. Rose in Hull, who are the party of the working classes?
Well, I think I have my problems with both, but I would have to say, for me personally, it's Labour. But I would certainly not vote for them, I have to say. I was a young person who voted out of the EU.
Yep.
Sorry to shock your listeners.
No. I mean, you know, a third of young people did. So, you know, it's not a tiny minority, is it?
No, of course not. My main problem with, as your previous caller said, it's that with Jeremy Corbyn, being honest, the open immigration thing. And
Yes.
the problem is, to talk about, what you're going to talk about America with Donald Trump in the 100 days.
Yep.
In this country, the defense was immigrants do the jobs people don't. And I'm sorry, but that is a total lie. That is an absolute lie.
Is it? Go on, tell me why.
Well, I just think as a young person, I'm at university, and I've always had to work in different types of jobs. I've worked in bars, I've done cleaning, I've done this, that, and the other. And I'm sorry to say that working class people will not do those jobs, in my mind, is an absolute lie. It's a total lie, and it totally alienates the working class, in my mind.
Is it not possible that actually what's been happening here is that big employers have been deliberately favouring overseas workers?
Yeah, and that's totally wrong in my mind. It's totally wrong, and this is what worries me about the working class, is that they have been exploited, but people have just said, oh, we'll hire immigrants because they'll do the job.
But despite all of that, you still think the Labour Party truly represents the working classes, yeah?
Between the two, Tories and Labour...
No, fair enough. Thank you very much indeed for your call. On Facebook, Scott says, Corbyn is promising all this money. Is he getting a payday loan for the country? Well, I tell you what, Scott, we're still borrowing 50 billion sterling every year. So whenever you hear it in this election, how are we going to pay for it? We're already running at a huge, huge deficit. Jack says, I don't love the Conservatives. Not many can say they are happy with the state of British politics right now. And Tom says, Labour have long since forgotten the working classes. I want to hear all your views on this subject, and I'm here for you to challenge me right now. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. Well, I have a guest with me today. I have got the Governor of Mississippi, Mr. Phil Bryant. Now, I met Phil on the Trump Trail last year, and it was in Jackson, Mississippi, where Phil got me on the stage with Donald J. Trump. It was a pretty sort of 18,000 people in a football stadium, Phil.
Yeah. They loved you.
It was, well, I know. I mean, they understood.
They absolutely loved you. It was so much fun, Nigel, and thank you for having me. This is exciting to know you guys are building this talk radio where people can listen to unfeathered and the story directly from you. But yeah, that was a great night. Candidate Trump was looking forward to seeing you, and Rudy Giuliani thought he was going to get to speak, and Nigel Farage spoke in his place.
Yes, the former mayor of New York got bounced for me, which was pretty remarkable.
Now, you're very popular in Mississippi.
I had a great time. Yeah. Now, we kind of understand in this country the president, and we sort of get the House of Reps and the Senate and all of that. Right. But can you just tell people, educate people, what is the governor of a state in the USA?
Well, it's a great job because you get to be an executive. Governors can make decisions. We have cabinets just like the president would. If you would think of a president of Mississippi, that would be much what I do every day. And our Constitution earlier, it was founded, said the real power rests within the states, and that power not directly afforded to the states would be left for the federal government. So it's inverted a little bit as time has gone on. But federalism would say that governors have the executive authority to run their state basically as independent states within this confederation of the United States of America. So it's an executive branch.
So you've got real power?
We think so. Sometimes the legislature doesn't like to say that, the Senate and the House, but certainly you can issue executive orders, such as the president. You're commander-in-chief of the National Guard, the military within your state. You're head of the law enforcement community, so the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Health, of Human Services. So you've got not only that, concerns of law enforcement and protection and military, but also the health and welfare of those people who really need support, not just those that would like it, but those that are in need.
Fascinating. Well, don't forget, you can watch Governor Phil Bryant live on LBC's Facebook page right now, and we're learning a bit, or I hope we're all learning a bit, about how America operates and the fact that each state has an elected governor who's got real executive power, and it matters a lot who gets elected.
And about 33 of us are Republicans. So, real large majority Republicans, most, like in Mississippi, majority Republicans in the legislature, the House of Representatives, and supermajority in the Senate. So, it is quickly becoming the conservative leadership that is assisting and helping President Donald Trump carry out his agenda is being done so at the grassroots level by governors who are helping initiate that.
So 33 of the 50 states are now Republican governors,
exactly.
which is a big change, isn't it?
It is.
It's a big change.
In about a decade, you saw those numbers. There were probably 33 or 34 Democrats a decade or so ago, and now Republicans. And as we're able, for example, in Mississippi, to pass a bill that will eliminate sanctuary cities within the state of Mississippi. So you would be in violation of state law if you were a mayor and designated a sanctuary city because they're political subdivisions of the state. And those are the type of things that we believe help.
Sanctuary cities, folks, are a very controversial issue in the USA, where basically illegal immigrants can effectively go and hide and be left pretty much as they are.
You have an elected official and a mayor and sometimes a city council or board of supervisors that say, we're going to assist. We're going to aid and abet illegal immigrants, maybe that have not only crossed our borders and came here illegally, but violated other state and local laws, and they're being kept and protected.
Yeah, that's a big row. Now look, it's over 100 days since the Trump inauguration, and I think from this side of the water, people are a bit confused. I mean, it kind of looks like Trump is having a pretty tough time getting his agenda through.
Well, it's just the world of bizarro, as we call it. If you read the liberal media, if you only watch MSNBC or if you only read the New York Times, you thought he's a total object failure. He's had a remarkable 100 days. And we all talked about Supreme Court justices and to have not only an appointment but confirmed a Supreme Court justice that is in the philosophy of Anton Scalia. This was critical. But the executive orders has been used. If you look at illegal crossing of the border along our southern border, down some 65%. Just the fact that he's allowing Immigration Customs Services to do their job and enforce the law has dramatically decreased the illegal crossing of our southern borders, which has had a dramatic effect, I can tell you, on the cost of health care, of education, of law enforcement that has to be spent by a governor for illegal immigration. So you look at the economy, less than 4% unemployment, or right around 4% unemployment, the lowest it's been in about a decade. Mississippi, it's the lowest unemployment has been since 1976. This president is moving each and every day. Look at what happened in Syria. So he sends a strong message to the rest of the world.
But a lot of Trump voters were very unhappy about that because he did say during the campaign he would generally be non-interventionist. So I know some Trump supporters and commentators were a bit nervous about that.
You know, it's always hard to keep everyone happy. If you're keeping everyone happy, you're doing something dramatically wrong.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So I think, and as you become a president, I think he evolves to the point of seeing what happened when those chemical agents were introduced and killing children and women, and as most men would, he wanted to react, and as a leader in the free world, he wanted to send a message. And by the way, those two destroyers that fired the Tomahawk missiles, both of them were manufactured in Mississippi at Pascagoula, at Ingalls, and so we're very
So you're happy about that at least.
But this is a very dangerous world, and I think strength is respected and expected, particularly by those in the Middle East that would want to do harm not only to the United States but to Great Britain.
Now, you know Donald Trump very well. You're a close friend and advocate, and here we are in the UK. We're in the middle of a general election, and it looks like Mrs. May is going to, having now taken the Brexit agenda, having been opposed to it, but she's taken it. In fact,
funny how that works.
Many of the things I've been saying for years, and she's saying it, and she's going to win big.
Good for her.
What does she need to do?
I think she started out right. She was the first world leader to come to Washington, D.C. and meet with the president. And that didn't go unnoticed, not only by the president, but by the supporters and the people of the United States. So we see, and I'm here in London today to help build that relationship. I was at the State Department today. I met with a couple of large companies that have investments in Mississippi. And we see a time, I think, of coming together of the United States and Great Britain that we haven't seen perhaps since Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, two great world leaders. I think if PMA picks up 150 seats, what a
majority,
mandate.
Well, I think she probably will, looking at the numbers.
see in the United States, those seem like huge numbers as a possibility.
Oh, it is.
Someone that we barely knew a year ago, had never heard her name, and now she's quickly on the world stage. But if we can develop that relationship that we have known in the past with these two great countries of ours, I think you're going to see, hopefully, Great Britain be a gateway to the EU and trade and support. In NATO, again, establishing safety and security here with the help and support of the United States. I think you're going to see a great generation of Americans and Brits coming together for the mutual benefit of the country.
Now, President Obama said that the United Kingdom would be at the back of the queue.
He did.
And we didn't like that very much. In fact, actually, to be fair, he helped the Brexit campaign. But there was a little story the other week that appeared in the Times of London saying that maybe Trump would consider Germany and the EU as being his priority for trade over the United Kingdom.
I don't think that's going to happen.
You don't?
I don't want to speak for the president, but I can tell you his affection for and support of Great Britain is very strong. We've heard him talk about it again. He understands the importance of Europe and EU, but this is, I think, a personal affection and belief that a stronger Great Britain means a freer, more prosperous world.
So if Mrs. May gets this right, we can have a free trade deal with the United States of America in a couple of years' time.
Again, it would surprise me if the president is not eager to put that deal together. He talks about free trade deals all the time, and I would imagine this would be at the front of the queue.
Good, right. That's the sort of language I want to hear. Now, the big debate in British politics today is who represents the working classes. And traditionally, our Labour Party was for the working classes, and the Tory Party was more seen to be the middle classes and the business owners. And it's interesting because I see some parallels here, because in a way, didn't Trump effectively go for working class factory workers, and yet he's a billionaire many times over.
But he's a blue collar billionaire. When I talk to the president, when we interact, he is so down to earth. And here's the governor of the state of Mississippi, and we have such a great relationship. I visited with him at the National Rifle Association meeting in Atlanta just a couple of weeks ago, and he is the most blue collar billionaire you'd ever want to meet.
I got to tell you, that is quite some phrase. A blue-collar billionaire.
Yeah.
It really
and
is
that
something.
sensitivity towards a working man comes through, and he can interact with guys that are out working each and every day. They feel that. They know the concern. And here's Barack Obama in this elevated limousine liberal position talking down to them as their jobs were evaporating, particularly in the coal country, for example, in the Rust Belt. And in comes this guy that says, hey, let's get out there and kick some doors open and bring our jobs back.
Now, later on, in October, there'll be a state visit from President Trump to the United Kingdom. Yeah. Do you think he's looking forward to that?
Oh, absolutely he is. I think he will make certain that people around the world understand that he's not coming here as a sense of duty, but a sense of honor and a sense of desire to be a part of Great Britain and the relationship between Great Britain and the United States. And I think you'll see him maybe channel a little Churchill while he's here.
And we're told he's a fan of the Queen.
I would think that would be correct.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we're fans of the Queen. I think the whole world are fans. And you might have heard that her husband, who's nearly 96, announced last week he's about to retire. So I think between them, they've done us great service.
Yeah.
Governor Bryant, thank you very much
Nigel,
for coming in, talking about America. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. Well, I've said goodbye to Governor Bryant of Mississippi, and for those that missed the interview, of course it'll be on LBC's webpage. I've never heard the term before when I asked him about Trump, blue-collar billionaire. I think that one will stick on that one. Will last. Now, other news today. Very interesting. YouGov, big poll today, asking people nearly a year on from the referendum how they feel and what they want to happen. And 45% just want us to leave the European Union. They couldn't really care less what the deal is. They just want us to leave. What's really interesting is there are 23% who are now defined as re-leavers. I guess that's Remainers who become leavers. Not the catchiest phrase I've ever heard. But 23% of people now say We voted Brexit, let's just get on with it. And haven't we seen over the last couple of months the number of callers who've said, I was Remain, but I now think Brexit needs to happen. But fascinatingly, only 22% now say they want the government to ignore the June election result. 22% is now the hardcore Remain vote. And I wonder whether that perhaps explains what's happening thus far in this election. Theresa May is potentially pitching her message to 68% of the population, whereas the Lib Dems, who we were told would bounce in the polls, would have a really big campaign, are actually aiming at only 1 in 5 voters, some of whom will have tribal loyalty to other political parties. And I wonder whether this fundamental change of opinion explains what is going on today. If anyone really fundamentally disagrees with me on that, then please do let me know. But I think basically, if you're a Remainer, and you're still a Remainer, you are on an iceberg that is melting very, very quickly. At least that's what I told Rachel Johnson at lunch today. She didn't seem very happy about it. But back to my theme of the evening, and that is that the Tory party, under Theresa May, have made a big pitch for working class votes. She's basically said, we are now the party for working people. Traditionally, it was always Labour that most represented the working classes in this country. And I'm asking you, which party truly represents the interests of working class people? Ross in Port Talbot, tell me, what do you think?
Hi, Nigel. Nice to be back on. How are you?
I'm very well, indeed, and you?
Good. Yeah, it's always been Labour for me, no matter how much I don't like the man, Mr. Corbyn.
Right.
I trust him with the working people, and I was saying this to the leaders meeting before. If the working class stopped going to work, the country would stop. Because without the working class, there is no hospitals. There's nothing out there. And to me, they're so important, the working class people, no matter where you're from. And to me, the Tory party have nothing on them. I know she's trying to get a vote in. Have a look what Theresa May was doing when she was canvassing a couple of days ago. And there was a woman who was living on disability living allowance.
Yes.
That completely cleaned her out because she was like, where's my disability living allowance? Where's my learning difficulties? It's not there. They're putting people on PIP.
But she says, Ross, and I'm going to quote the Prime Minister. She says the Conservative Party is the unashamed voice of ordinary working people once again. That's what she's saying.
I just can't. I can't trust that. And like I said to you previously when I was on the show, I don't like Jeremy Corbyn. I can't stand Diane Abbott. But I will. But I've made up my mind. I will vote for Labour in the next election.
Yeah.
Simply down on the fact that this NHS needs to be sorted for the likes of me, you, and anyone else in this country that can't afford private healthcare. We don't want to be in a situation like we are with our good friends across the Atlantic, like the governor of Mississippi was just on now. With the poor people can't afford the healthcare in America, there's no treatment. You know, we are very privileged to have an incredible health service in this country, no matter what state it's in. I'd rather someone lead us, which can put the working class people first. And get this NHS working again.
And do you think? I mean, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn has a strong identity with working class people?
Yes, I do.
You do, Ross. You couldn't be clearer. I thank you for your call. I'm going to ask Adam in Buckinghamshire what he thinks.
Hello, Nigel. Well,
Hello.
I think neither the Conservatives nor Labour are the party of the working class. And let me just give you my quick views on both. The Conservatives, they've come out with this idea about, we're a party for the workers now. You can have 12 months off unpaid to look after a relative. I see that very much as trying to think, well, we'll be able to get away with paying for domiciliary care for people who are in severe need of it because, after all, they can get one of their relatives to do it, and that might be built into future legislation. And then if they really cared about the workers, then they would revoke the £1,200 fee it costs to go to industrial tribunal.
Yes, they did. They did bring that in, Adam, and I know that because I think the feeling was that there were too many sort of vexatious complaints being made.
Yeah, and the way to go after a vexatious complaint, or the way to prevent that, is have robust decisions, robust judicial decisions, whereby you'll be able to go after the complainant if they have made a vexatious complaint to get money back from them.
Yep.
So only people who are confident that they are genuine can go ahead.
Well, she's also, Adam, Adam, fascinatingly, Theresa May's hinting that all employee protection and worker protection that came in through European law would stay on the UK statute book. Now, that is quite a big shift, isn't it? And this is a long way from Mrs Thatcher, isn't it?
It is, but when it comes to workers' rights and everything, we had the Officers of Shops Act, Health and Safety Act way before Europe, and many other European countries had it. So
yep.
I think worker health and safety and worker protection has always been ingrained. Labour or Conservatives, always been a British thing. Now, if I could just character assassinate the Labour Party now.
Go on. You're enjoying yourself. Why not?
Yeah. We've got a situation now whereby we've got the Labour Party, be they pro-Corbynite or anti-Corbynite. They are still the intellectual elites. They don't really like the working class. We can see that in Diane Abbott, who actually kind of despises the working class. They are still...
Does she really?
Well, I really have that feeling. I think she thinks a lot of white working class people are racists if we want to control our own borders.
But only if they voted Leave.
Oh, yes, only... After all, according to many of the Islington intellectuals, because we're too stupid to understand everything else. So
we are really stupid, Adam, aren't we? We really are dumb. Yeah, go on.
So I think Labour have actually lost... I think Labour lost its way when John Smith died. John Smith was a Prime Minister in waiting. Then we had that creature, Blair, that has taken us into many different wars.
Very successful politician, won 3 general elections, massive Labour majorities.
This is the sad thing about it. When Labour go really Trotsky, when they go very left-wing, people desert them. When they come back to the centre, they were getting some sensible centrist policies under Blair. People said, yes, we trust you with the economy. Now, how could anybody trust the modern-day Labour Party with the economy when they think my children and their children are going to be saddled with debt for their lifetime long after I've died?
So, Adam, it's pretty clear that you're condemning everybody. Who do you think in this election will win the war for working class votes?
Who do you think will win the war to actually get votes?
Yeah.
Probably the Conservatives.
Yeah.
But I think it will be on hollow promises.
And it'll be on Brexit, really, won't it?
There is a lot of people are saying, OK, we need to go forward with the main issue of the decade, which is Brexit. So let's go forward. Mind you, Jeremy Corbyn's played... But you've got Jeremy Corbyn, who was an arch-leaver all his life, who suddenly became a Remainer.
I know.
And you've had...
and you've got May the other way round, and you've got the right-wing Conservatives now sounding quite left-wing, and the whole thing's a bit confusing. Adam, I think left and right's out of the window. I've thoroughly enjoyed the call. On Facebook, Stuart says, what defines working class? Even the Queen has duties to perform. My granny does less. Lorraine says, not many career politicians give a damn about the working classes. None of them, I get on Twitter. They only have their own interests at heart. It's called power, says David Hodgkin. Strange question. I wasn't aware that any political party truly represented the working class. Is this a trick question? Asks Katie. Look, the traditional definition of the working class, I think, is much wider and broader in many ways than it was before. It's almost anybody that's out there working, isn't it? But the question is, for a lot of skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled Labour, for them, traditionally, the Labour Party was their home. We saw UKIP bite very deep into what's called the C2, skilled workers group, and now what we've seen today is an all-out assault from a Conservative Prime Minister to go for that audience. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. Well, for the last 5 months on my show, I've been listening to what you've got to say about the big issues of the day. And next week, I'm going to come out and try and meet you face to face to hear about the things affecting you and how you're going to vote and why, up and down the country. The Nigel Farage Roadshow will be live next week from Manchester, Birmingham, Newcastle and Glasgow. And I want to hear from you. If you've got a burning issue, then get yourself in the audience, get on air on LBC, go to lbc.co.uk to register and be part of the conversation. That's the Nigel Farage Roadshow, all next week, only on LBC. And I'm looking forward to it very much indeed. And one of the questions we'll be asking next week, I know we will, is which party in this election best represents the interests of working class people. No longer, it seems to me, can the Labour Party take it for granted that the working classes in droves are going to vote for them. And Mrs May today has not just made a big pitch for their vote, she's also taken the Conservative Party in a direction that we've never seen in modern times, particularly when she says she will keep all EU employee protection law in place in this country. These are big, seismic shifts in British politics. Will, in Birmingham, which party now best represents the working classes?
Hi, Nigel. Nice to speak to you. The Conservatives, and for me, it's been the Conservatives for a long time.
Has it?
The 10% tax rate was abolished by a Labour government, by Gordon Brown, back in 2008, I believe.
Yep.
George Osborne has accelerated the raising of the personal allowance, bringing hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands, I'm not sure on statistics, out of actually paying income tax.
Yeah, that was actually, Will, to be fair, wasn't that one of the things that the Lib Dems in the coalition pushed hard for?
It was, but those increases in the personal allowance have continued under the David Cameron and George Osborne government, even though it was a short-lived government. I have every hope and faith that they're going to carry on raising. Whereas if Labour get in with Jeremy Corbyn's plans, they're going to spend more. They say they're going to tax the richest. They're going to raise tax for corporations and business, which is going to deter employers from taking on new employees. So unemployment could quite realistically rise, in my opinion, which means that more working class people are actually going to be out of work, not working at all.
But Will, aren't you missing something? Will, aren't you missing something? Immigration. What have the Tories done to reduce immigration?
Well,
nothing.
Nigel, while we've been in the European Union, and this is an argument that you've used many times, our hands were tied. We couldn't do anything about immigration while we were members of the European Union. There was nothing we could do.
But equally, Will, what they didn't do was to reduce non-EU migration. They failed at that as well.
That's a fair point. But
you see, well, I take your points about the personal allowance. And by the way, I've campaigned for that for years and years and years, and I agree with it completely. I get that point, but I genuinely believe that the issue for working class people has been mass immigration. The impact not just on their jobs, on their income, but actually on the communities in which they live as well. And yet, I'm just asking myself, is anybody really even discussing immigration in this election campaign at all?
Nigel, I think you've got a really fair point there, and I was a Leave voter. I voted Leave because of the constitutional issues as well as the issues with immigration and the bureaucracy coming from Brussels. But again, the Conservatives, they haven't met it, but they were the only party to seriously pledge out of the main parties back in 2010 that they would cut immigration to the tens of thousands. They haven't done it.
No.
Labour weren't prepared to even talk about it then, and even now, Jeremy Corbyn is very wishy-washy about immigration. He hasn't set a target that Labour would set to meet.
No, well, this is my point, Will. This is my point. He won't do that. And when Nick Ferrari on LBC interviewed the Prime Minister last week on this issue of immigration, she didn't really have an answer, did she?
No, she didn't. And I don't think they have got an answer. Personally, from where I'm sat looking at the whole thing, I think that Mr Corbyn has already given up on general election. Their manifesto, in my opinion, is just rubbish. It's not worth the paper it's written.
Well, hang on. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it yet, have we?
Who has seen it?
Well, it was leaked, of course, but
it was leaked, and then pretty much they've come out and said, "Oh, the manifesto's been approved." They haven't said, "Oh, yes, we will." Tomorrow,
I think we're going to get the Labour manifesto, and we'll discuss it at length tomorrow evening. Will, I thank you very much for your call. I get on Twitter from David Anderson, spent 3 generations complaining politics is full of left-right. Refreshing to see some centrism globally. Well, certainly in France it looks like there's a bit of centrism. Historically, the Labour Party have represented the working classes, but things have changed. They are now more to the left compared to the traditional left-of-centre vote. And a bit of advice here. Remain voters who have changed their mind should be called later leavers. Now, I prefer that, David in Liverpool. Later leavers sounds to me better than relievers. It sounds like they might be doing something awkward. Right, Steve in Manchester. Who represents the working classes?
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Right now, no one clearly represents the working class. You've got a choice right now between the hard left socialists under Jeremy Corbyn, and you've got Theresa May, who seems to be hoovering up everyone's good policies. Traditionally the Conservatives represent hedge fund managers, big bankers, big multinationals, big Tory donors. That's where their bread and butter is. The socialists under Labour, represented by the unions, they get their money from the union membership.
Yeah.
They've gone extreme to the left. The Tories are sort of trying to position themselves in rhetoric only, as the centre party of the working class. When you look at what they've done to social care and austerity, cutting back, providing for those people, just about managing, as they call them, I don't think they're going to follow through on their promises.
You don't?
No.
Right. So is Mrs. May over-promising in this election campaign?
I think she said when she was Home Secretary she's going to cut net migration down to the tens of thousands.
Yep.
We all know what happened there, right?
Yep.
So she's rhetoric doesn't follow through. I think with Brexit, she's rhetoric. She's not going to follow through.
So, Steve, really, your conclusion is that nobody really represents the working classes.
It should have been UKIP, but UKIP have been caught flat-footed by, unfortunately, your departure into different avenues. They've not got out the starting blocks yet, I don't think. They've had some bad results. It's right now for UKIP to step into the centre ground and say, we're the party of the working class. Right. So
Steve, you think there's a big gap for UKIP here at some point, whether it's in this election or in the future with working class voters?
It's crying out for a centrist party. It's crying out.
Yep.
You look at the Conservatives' history, they've not really ever stood for the working class in their history. You look at the Socialists under Labour, Jeremy Corbyn, they're for about the something for nothing, right? So they want to tax the big multinationals, the big earners,
yep,
and give it to the people who are just about managing, right? Okay, look, she's good in theory, but you've got to look at the value of the pound, inflation, and...
OK, Steve, I'm going to have to stop you there. Time is running out. You've had a good go. Clive, you're my last caller of this evening. You've got 40 seconds to make your point. Good evening, Clive.
OK, Conservatives have never been for the working class, never have, never will.
Right.
But the things that are most important to people of this country were brought in the Labour government in 1945 and other governments since. The Conservatives under Thatcher sacked thousands of people daily. Every time you picked up the paper, there were so many thousand here, so many thousand there, and it goes on and on and on. The Conservatives do not represent the working class. They're not middle of the road. They never will be and never have. I'm old enough now, and young people have voted for the first time. Get the manifestos and read them.
Well,
get them all and read them.
Clive, on that note, I'm going to tell you that every day the manifestos come out, we will, on this show, concentrate on that party's manifesto for the day, starting tomorrow with the Labour Party. And thank you for your calls and texts and tweets and Facebook messages. My final thought on who truly represents the working classes in this country: no one. Because actually, if you look at the front benches, as it exists in the House of Commons today, there are hardly any working class representatives actually there. I think there is still a big gap in the market, actually. Don't forget, you can apply for tickets for my roadshow on lbc.co.uk. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back tomorrow from 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and we're going to continue this conversation. It's a month now after the election was actually announced. I wonder if you're any the wiser about what you're being offered. What do you think is the quality of the campaign that's going on at the moment? I asked particularly because we've got Theresa May today.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, Trump has been under huge attack in Washington and elsewhere in the world today after a meeting he had with the Russian foreign minister discussing what to do about potential terrorist attacks on aeroplanes. And I'll talk more about that later in the show. But the dominant issue is today was the Labour manifesto launch. And I have to say, the day did not get off to a very good start because John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, when he was asked a simple question, what was the size of the deficit, played for time, we think went on Wikipedia, gave a figure of £70 billion, which is a year out of date. It's actually £52 billion. Not a good start to the day for Labour. But Jeremy Corbyn, in Bradford, delivered his manifesto speech. And I have to say, I thought he did it with some gusto. He did it with some passion. I've got a feeling, whatever the opinion polls are saying, that in some ways Corbyn is really enjoying being out on the road. He's attracting big crowds of people. Of that there is no doubt at all. So what was in this manifesto? Well, clearly there are going to be some big tax rises for those earning £80,000 a year or more. There's going to be a sweeping wave of renationalisations. He did, for the first time today, say that free movement would end once Brexit had occurred, but at the same time, he said, he'd put no cap on the numbers of people that could come into the country in terms of overall immigration. So I don't think that really has been cleared up. But perhaps the most eye-catching piece of the whole thing was that Labour would abolish tuition fees. Now, there have been a lot of questions asked as to, well, if the Shadow Chancellor doesn't even know the size of a deficit, how on earth are these 48 billion extra pounds of promises really ever going to be raised, and would not the deficit spiral under Labour? They're the questions that have been asked. But, as I say, there were one or two quite eye-catching initiatives in this, and it was delivered by a Labour leader who, to me, actually appeared to be enjoying himself. So I want you to tell me, does this manifesto win your vote or not? That's the question. And if you're saying, do you know what, Jeremy, you're the guy for me, then you can call me on 0345 6060973. You may think this isn't just back to the 1970s with tax, it's back to the 1940s with renationalisation. And if that's how you feel, well, you can text me at 84850. Or you may think, do you know what, actually, there are some ideas here that need to be talked about because they are radical, they are different, and perhaps after a bit of discussion, we'll make our minds up. And in that case, using the hashtag Farage at LBC, you can tweet at LBC. So please, get involved. Give me your opinion. And we will, over the course of the next 2 weeks, be analysing all of each individual party's manifesto launch. So if you think I'm being a bit critical tonight, or I'm trying not to be, but if you think I'm being a bit critical tonight of some of the things that Labour have promised, I will do the same absolutely for everybody. And your job, of course, is to tell me that I'm wrong, or if you want, even tell me that I'm right. You can also, of course, watch us on LBC's Facebook page right now. I'm here in Strasbourg, in the belly of the beast, where tomorrow morning, Mr. Juncker will be sitting in seat number 21, just next to me, and I'll be sitting in seat number 20. I wonder whether he'll find it within himself to be politer to me than he was to the British Prime Minister. I somehow rather doubt it. But back to the Labour launch. Does this manifesto win you over or not? John in Bournemouth, you're the first caller tonight.
Good evening, Nigel. Can I say you've had my respect for years and you're a great man. It's the first time I've ever spoken to you since you've been RBC, and I will be trying to listen to your exchange with Juncker tomorrow. But yes, the Labour manifesto has blown me out of the air. I have to admit, I was a UKIP member, expires on the 1st of June, and I will be voting Labour. I agree with nearly everything in the manifesto. I think it's what Britain needs. I know you're going to disagree with things, but I think on the whole, most of it's really good. I have to admit, I'm slightly worried myself about the tuition fees because it's been a thing in the past. But it is supposed to be phased, and it needs to be structured, because I worked in a university back in, actually London University, back in the, actually I met you once in the town of Timothy Taylor down near Parliament.
Well, that sounds, that does sound about right, doesn't it?
Back in the 1990s. It was 14 pence a pint.
I believe you, I believe you. Do you? No, I mean, it's very interesting. But John, as a former UKIP member, you would probably have seen immigration and the impacts of immigration on wages, on the ability to get GP appointments, on the changing shape of communities, you would probably have seen that as being a major issue. And yet, you know, when you look...
It's not my major issue in this election.
Okay.
I was always going to vote. I went to a meeting, I can't remember which your MPs came down to the pool in mid-Dorset, and I can't remember which one it was. He was your strategy expert, and he said Theresa May was going to go on to 1919 or 1920. That's what he actually said. Sorry, what am I about? 2019 or 2020, then call an election. I did a double Brenda. I was trying to get a doctor's appointment that day, and I didn't get one. And I got home, and I did a double Brenda before Brenda came on the radio or television. Believe me, I thought, I don't believe this, because I was always going to vote Labour the next election. And she did have my mandate to negotiate our exit from Europe. She had that, but I'm afraid I'm straight behind this. This country needs sorting out. Yes, look at the costings, but I think there's a lot of money out there in tax evasion. There's of interest, just been reading about the way they're going to sort of look at offshore trusts. It was one of the Labour documents I just downloaded. I'm behind it completely. I'm aware of that. Yeah, I'm totally behind it. I think it's in the best interest of the country. It's what we need, because this country, too many people in this country are earning lots of money, and lots of people are downtrodden. Homelessness is on the streets in Bournemouth and Poole. They keep saying they've got no local connection. Easter Sunday, I went to the beach for a church service. Had homeless men in the doorways. Friday night, I came back from Guernsey. Homeless men in the doorways in Poole.
No, John, I know that. John, I know that. I understand that completely. But, you know, my argument's always been with this, that you don't help the downtrodden by taxing or penalising the rich, whether it's individuals or businesses, because what they then do, John, is they simply leave.
No, but there is this, that if really we don't. In Germany, Nigel, they had this thing called the middle structure or something, middle businesses, where they've always invested and they've always stood family-owned. They even make all our supermarket trolleys. We lack that sector in the United Kingdom. Labour have actually said they will not tax businesses that have, what is it?
Hang on, John. They're going to put corporation tax up substantially. They're going to introduce a tax on city transactions on derivatives. That means every single one of those firms will leave the City of London.
0.02%, Nigel, or was it 0.025%?
Well, 0.2 or 0.5, depending whether you're retail or wholesale. But believe you me, in some of those trading industries where there's very high turnover, they can frankly move to Switzerland pretty much overnight. So that concerns me. That does worry me. But I just don't think you help the downtrodden, John, by punishing the rich and successful. That's my feeling.
Nigel, if I was still working, I have an illness and I care for my mother, I'd probably be earning about 50,000 a year, and I would pay more. I'd pay a couple of thousand more in tax if it helped people out. But well,
John, you are. John, you are. All the best to you. You are a very kind-hearted, public-spirited individual. The trouble is, John, I think you're in a bit of a minority. And it's funny, it's true, but the richer people are, the more likely they are to up sticks and move. But, John, thank you. John there has given a very strong testimony. He thinks Corbyn actually is going to tackle many of the issues affecting the downtrodden in this country. And, John, I have to say, I said at the start of this programme, I thought Corbyn today, whatever you think of the policies, I felt he delivered this with gusto and with passion. William in Selby, are you sold on Jeremy's manifesto?
Hi there, Nigel. Yeah, I love the manifesto. I think it's pretty awesome. But also, I think it's great. I think it's great for workers. But also, I think something we can agree on is that it's actually really good for immigration. No party has pledged this, but Labour's pledge is that at the minute we have uncontrolled immigration into the UK, where companies can hire foreign workers at a lower rate than British citizens. Labour is committing that companies won't be allowed to hire foreign workers or immigrants at a lower rate than British people.
Well, that's all well and good.
It's been in the manifesto for years.
That's all well and good, William. But there are other parts of this manifesto that say that Labour would keep us up to speed and equivalent with other European employment regulations, etc. And one of the difficulties here is whether it's stopping that or whether even it's renationalising our industries. If we were to stay close to the single market, the European Union wouldn't even allow us to do these things. So I'm a little bit sceptical. You know,
these are trade union sort of things. These can be done. You don't have. These can be done while you're still in the European Union.
Well, renationalisation as an EU member simply isn't allowed. And the reason that we have separate management of track and rail in this country goes back to a European directive in 1991. Now, if Labour really are accepting that we're leaving the EU, then yes, they can renationalise. But actually, William, on immigration, what he's saying is he doesn't intend to put any target or any cap at all. Is that really what people want?
Well, what people want is that they're getting a fair treatment from employers, and therefore not getting their wages compressed. We're seeing wages fall. Wages are being compressed. People having less and less money. This would prop up people's wages and stop so many immigrants coming in.
No. Well, actually, William, the more we put up the minimum wage, the more we're likely to attract people from countries where it's 6 or 7 times cheaper. So I'm not completely convinced by that. But anyway, you like the manifesto. How did you think Corbyn himself performed?
No, I think it was pretty good. He was very enthusiastic anyway. Yeah, definitely.
No, he was. I agree with that. Are you normally, William, a Labour voter or not?
Well, I'm only 20, but this is my first time voting. But yeah, I'll definitely be voting Labour. I've always supported Labour. So yeah.
Yep. Okay, William. Thank you very much indeed. Well, William loves the manifesto. What does Craig in Newport think?
Good afternoon. How are you, Nigel?
I'm very well, and you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I'm a bit of a floating voter. I voted UKIP at the last election, but I voted both Conservative and Labour in the past. Being from Wales, you know, it was the Labour heartland.
It was. It was. That's it. But that Craig now is in very, very serious jeopardy, isn't it?
It is, yes, yeah, and it's quite concerning. Look, I think Corbyn did quite well in his speech. I think it was set right. You know, he chose the place in front of all those nurses to, you know, announce his manifesto, which was, you know, a great bit of, he done well. However, I love the manifesto. I think he's offered people, you know, nice things, but I just wish we had more time to digest it all and dissect it all, because I'm not quite sure whether everything on the face of it will turn out, or whether they can actually do everything that they say they're going to do.
Well, I think, Craig, to be honest, that's the case with all parties and all manifestos in every election for all time kind of thing. I mean, you can read it, of course, Craig. It's 128 pages long. They had a long manifesto back in 1983 that was called the longest suicide note in history. But so far, Craig, you, and I thank you for your call, and everybody else is saying they actually really like it. So we're analysing today the Labour Party's manifesto launch. We'll be analysing all the parties as they launch. Don't forget, you know, you can get involved with this. You can call, you can text, you can tweet. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. Today was the launch of the Labour manifesto. Jeremy Corbyn was in Bradford. He was fired up. He was excited. He said he will put up taxes for the top earning 5% of the country. He will renationalise the railways, water and much of our energy sector. He will end 0 hours contracts. He will abolish university tuition fees. He will ban fracking. He will build 1 million new homes. He will extend HS2 all the way to Scotland, and he sees no need for a cap or a limit on immigration numbers coming into the United Kingdom. You know, whichever way you cut this, and I'm looking at all of this, and I'm thinking, actually, putting up taxes, putting up corporation taxes, it won't bring in more tax because people simply will leave the country. But whether I'm right or wrong in that, what you have to say about this manifesto is that it was delivered with gusto and passion, and it does have in it some really very eye-catching, radical, interesting, and so far, callers have thought, exciting things. Whether it can be afforded is another question. But is it, in a general election that I felt in the last week has actually been getting a little bit stale, at least this is something we can genuinely talk about. Yes, I know it had all been leaked before, but at least we've legitimately got what it is today. Jane in Llandudno, what did you make of the Corbyn launch?
Good evening, Nigel. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Good evening.
I have always been a Conservative. I voted UKIP last time. We don't have a UKIP constituent. Oh, sorry, excuse me, I'm nervous. In our area, we don't have anyone standing in our area.
Don't be nervous, Jane. You're on LBC. Enjoy yourself.
Okay. I found myself... There are elements that I thought would be so appealing to people, but what I don't understand is why the current government is not collecting taxes from overseas businesses importing products into this country, and we are not collecting the taxes from them.
Okay.
I'm struggling with that element. I'm a business owner, and we are struggling against this at the minute.
Jane, let me explain. As part of the European Economic Area, which is the European Union countries, plus it's also Switzerland and Norway, any company that's trading internationally can opt to pay its corporation tax wherever it chooses. So, for example, if you wanted to pay a lower corporation tax, you could go to Ireland, where it's 12.5%. You could go to Switzerland. Indeed, when Mr. Juncker was Prime Minister of Luxembourg, people were paying about 2%. So one of the potentially, Jane, one of the benefits of Brexit is that we get back genuinely our tax sovereignty on these issues. Now, I know it's not easy with things being sold online. It's quite difficult in some cases, but we will get back tax sovereignty. But, Jane, the real question is that if Labour would have put corporation tax up by 6 or 7%, would it yield more money, or actually would it bring in less money? That's the issue.
Well, I think at the moment there are a lot of people, as I say, like myself, that we've got a duty scenario going on in this country that UK duty is particularly high. I import wine from all over the world.
Yes.
The UK duty is particularly high. I struggle to explain to our producers why I need to put a premium on their wine, why I need to sell it at a higher price, because the UK duty is so high.
No, Jane. No, Jane.
Companies selling it in without paying any of the UK duty, and it's so frustrating. So, I'm a UK taxpayer. I've paid tax all my life. I've been working all my life. And I just find at the moment who's going to act for me? Is Theresa a silent Remainer, and we're all going to be stitched up here? If she gets a massive vote and she's got a minority, are we all going to find ourselves in a position that she's just going to put a cabinet together and it will just go the way they want it to go? No deal.
Well, Jane, let's get back to wine, shall we? Because that's actually far more interesting than the general election, and I'm very keen on this subject. Yes, of course, we've got UK duties on wine, but also, Jane, what we've got is EU tariffs on wine. Very, very big tariffs we put on wine coming into this country from Australia or anywhere outside the European Union. So again, with Brexit, if we wanted, we could buy Australian wine a lot cheaper than we're currently buying it. That will be if Brexit is achieved up to us. Now, you asked about Theresa May. Their manifesto launch, Jane, is on Thursday. Let's see what they have to say. My own, and we're doing Labour tonight, but in 10 seconds, my concern is the bigger her majority and the more career politicians and former special advisors that get elected to the Tory backbenches, actually, the bigger her majority, the more she's likely to concede many of the things that people who voted Brexit thought they were going to get. Jane, how do you now think you're going to vote?
At the minute, because I haven't got I want to have a UKIP candidate in my area, and I haven't got that. I'm in North Wales, and I haven't got one. And to me, I needed to have the opposition, and I don't have it. And I couldn't possibly vote for Tim Farron.
Right. Okay. Well,
and obviously Leanne Woods is just a waste of space. It's Plaid Cymru is the other option up here.
Yeah.
I am really struggling personally with my vote.
Well, you've still got 3 weeks to go, Jane, and thank you as a first-time caller for calling in. And there we are. It wasn't that bad, really, was it?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. 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 On Facebook, I get Will saying to me, the Tories have doubled our national debt. Thank you, Will. Somebody else out there understands this. Very nearly trebled the debt. Let's spend the money on health and education instead of allowing billionaires to stockpile money that should be in circulation. Will, one point you're making is very, very clear. One of the things in this election that gets me down is they say, how are you going to pay for it? Well, the answer is, we're not paying for things now. Theresa May will tell you, we've got this completely under control. Oh, no, we haven't. They have more than doubled the national debt, which has been going since the times we fought Napoleon. They've more than doubled it in 7 years. We are still borrowing £50 billion every year because our income does not match our outgoings. Alan says Corbyn says Castro is a hero. Well, yeah, he does. Robert says the last Labour idiots who tried something like this were Wilson, Callaghan and Healey. They had to call in the IMF to bail out the UK. Left-wingers never learn from their mistakes. OK, well, there's some strong feelings on the other side of the argument. Tony in Bedford. You looked at this manifesto. Is it back to the past? Is it back to the 1940s? Or is this actually what modern Britain needs?
Hi, Nigel. Great to be on the show.
Hello.
I've got 2 points. Firstly, I quite like the manifesto, but I feel it's been rather wasteful. What I mean by that is that there's a lot of excess spending that they could have cut back on, which means that they didn't need to raise as much revenue. So, for example, they could have put the new tax rate up to 90,000 instead of 80,000. And what I mean is, like, rather than scrapping tuition fees completely, they could have put them back down to 3,000. So that could have made the manifesto more palatable. Secondly, I wanted to talk about the costing of the Labour manifesto.
Please, yeah, well, I tell you what was really interesting was when they were asked about, you know, the renationalisation of water, they simply didn't have an answer to that, did they?
You mean about the costing?
No, I mean, you know, none. I mean, actually, a combination, Tony, of Diane Abbott on with Nick Ferrari, of the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell this morning on the BBC. It doesn't appear. I mean, you know, as I say, there are some eye-catching initiatives in this manifesto, but they don't seem, Tony, to be very good at sums, do they?
They don't need to be costed. And what I mean by that is that when you're borrowing the money to purchase, you know, the utilities, the railways, whatever, you get the asset, and the asset offsets the debt. So it's not like an ongoing spend, like a benefit spend or something like that. So I think, you know, people are looking at it the wrong way. What should be costed is the interest on the debt, which I'm not sure they have done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time I looked at this, I think our current interest payments on the national debt are bigger than the annual defence budget. So that's about where we are at the moment.
But I think, of course, as well, the national debt is going to go up. But just looking at the headline figure is wrong. If Labour are going to make, you know, the government bigger by making all these purchases, you know, the debt's obviously going to be bigger. So you should take a ratio, something like net debt over assets or something like that. That's more reflective because otherwise you're not comparing apples to apples, if you know what I mean.
No, OK. But, Tony, fine, I'm fascinated by what you've got to say. Is the manifesto good enough to convince you to vote Labour?
Unfortunately, no, because I'm in a Conservative stronghold and the Lib Dems are a close second, so I'll be voting for them.
You're a tactical voter. Very good. Tony, thank you ever so much for your call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and once again, Washington and US politics is a day of huge arguments, and it seems to be quite a common feature, because last night we had the governor of Mississippi, Phil Bryant, on the show, and he described Donald Trump, I'm never going to forget this term, as a blue-collar billionaire. Either way, there are significant sections of the establishment in Washington that can't stand him. And today Trump has defended his absolute right to discuss sensitive material on terrorism and airline safety at a meeting with Russia's foreign minister. Lavrov was in the White House last week, and they talked particularly about the worries that America have about laptops potentially being taken onto planes and used to ignite explosions. Now, there are some are saying this is wrong because this betrays the source. And no one's confirming or denying, but it's thought that perhaps Israel was the source. And I'm just very struck that, frankly, anything Trump does is jumped on by the opposition and the liberal media and made into a complete and utter storm. The National Security Advisor, General McMaster, has said tonight he's done absolutely nothing wrong. And what on earth is wrong in sharing intelligence with another country to work together to fight against what ISIS might do to our communities. I really find this row quite utterly extraordinary. There we are. But I admit I'm a Trump supporter, and you may think I'm completely wrong. And by the way, if you want to call in on that and tell me I'm wrong, please feel free. We're going to go now to Leon in Portsmouth, and I'm going to ask you, Leon, has Corbyn, with this eye-catching, although perhaps not very well-costed manifesto, has he caught your eye?
Well, yeah. It's nice to speak to you, Nigel.
Good evening.
I'm a young person in England, and I've been pretty inclined to vote Conservative for, well, all of my life up till this general election was called, when I was actually looked at the different policies and what the parties are proposing. I've seen that Labour seems to be the only party that actually appeals to the younger people, because they said they've pledged to inject over £25 billion into a national education service and scrap the $9,000 a year tuition fees. So I just want to know, what can the other governments do? I mean, they seem to be winning over everyone. Well, it was
I mean, it was Labour, of course, who brought tuition fees in to begin with. It's one of the closest scrapes that Tony Blair had in Parliament, getting that through, despite having a massive majority. It was very interesting. And then, of course, it was the Lib Dems, Leon, that got in real trouble on this, because Clegg had held up a great big pledge card to say they would not, support an increase in tuition fees. And, of course, for most students, actually, they trebled with Clegg as Deputy Prime Minister. So it is a big issue. It is. I mean, Leon, my view on it is, we now send about 4 times the number of young people to university as we did when I left school. So no wonder we have to charge. It does seem to me, though, that for subjects like science, technology, engineering, medicine, where there is such a chronic shortage, Leon, of skilled people in this country that we have to import people from abroad. I would certainly want to abolish tuition fees on those subjects.
Yeah, well, I think with tuition fees, I think it's great for every subject, to be fair. But I think the fact that Labour's pledged so much money to it starts me worrying about where they're going to get the money from. I mean, you can't trust Diane Abbott, can you? You've seen her on the show. You know what she's like with figures and facts. She's not very good, is she?
She wouldn't be very good at teaching GCSE maths, would she? No, I agree.
Not at all, no.
but tell me, Leon, are you a student at the moment?
Yes, I am, yeah.
You are? Because I'll tell you what's really interesting is that a lot of current students who are racking up these debts actually aren't terribly impressed by this policy. Do you know why? It's not going to help them, is it?
No, I understand. I mean, the debts that people have been getting, I mean, I've known people that have come out with like 30,000 in debt and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't a great way to start life, is it, when you leave university? You want to be able to get a good job, get a mortgage, get a house, and, kickstart your life for the future. But
that's true, Leon, although when you get a mortgage, believe you me, you've taken on an even bigger debt.
Oh, gosh, yeah. But it's the only way you can do it at the moment, whereas with this, I think this is a sort of something that you can change, and it won't make a huge impact. But, I mean, it will obviously make an impact on money. But I think that it's a good idea, and I don't see what the other governments are going to do about it. I mean, the Lib Dems, I could never vote for them because, I mean, they want to reverse Brexit. Why? It's a great thing for this country.
Oh, well, I think so too, Leon. But look, I mean, so you think that Corbyn came up today with some good, eye-catching ideas, but you're worried how he's going to pay for it.
Yep, exactly that. I think that, Labour, with the money, I think they need to try and, if they can show me exactly how they're going to get this money and make it appealing to me, then I think they definitely want to vote.
OK, Leon, thank you. And believe you me, that is a question that is going to be asked of Corbyn and of McDonnell endlessly for the next 3 weeks. How are you going to pay for it? Texts and tweets, Nigel, they're moving away anyway. The banks and those affected by the Robin Hood tax are already buying properties on European soil. You know this is right. Well, actually, to be precise, I think they're buying it on Swiss soil, mostly, because there was talk of the EU introducing this across all the member states. Sweden did do this, by the way. Back in the 1990s, Sweden did bring this tax in, and what they saw was their financial services industry leave en masse, and so then they actually had to reverse it. If these Labour voters think that Mr Corbyn is the best thing since sliced bread, God help us. I will vote for the sensible party, not the party that supports the shirkers and that think everything comes for free, says Peter in Hounslow. The Corbyn launch did nothing to address the true question that was at the heart of Brexit, controlling our borders. Well, I keep saying this. Every day this general election goes by, I keep saying the issue that has been number one in people's concerns, that has dominated politics, that led, I think more than anything, to the rise of UKIP, that led to the Brexit vote in the referendum, was the issue of immigration. Yes, open-door immigration to the EU, but actually it was about the sheer numbers of people coming into Britain from wherever. And what I'm finding with this general election is we're barely even talking about it. I can't fathom it. But, I mean, tell me, you know, maybe you feel that immigration doesn't matter anymore, but I think actually people still do. I wonder what John in Formby thinks about the Corbyn launch. John, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Nigel. I think this has come too late. I think the damage has already been done. One thing Labour has going against it is the old Tory argument that gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Essentially, Labour crashed the car, and the Tory plea is don't give them the keys again.
Yes, I mean, that is the Tory plea, but I also get a bit upset, John, when the Tories give the... I mean, I had this with Cameron in the leaders' debates in 2015, when he said, we are the ones who are being prudent and we're in control, you know, of the country's finances. And I said, Mr Cameron, you've doubled the national debt since you became Prime Minister. And he just kind of stared at me, and nobody else on the panel thought to follow up. And still, John, I repeat the point, we are still living beyond our means as a country to the tune of £50 billion a year. So it's all well and good, John, the Tories saying that Labour would wreck the finances, but I don't think the Tory record on this is really very good, do you?
No, I don't. But I think it comes down to the lesser of two evils. But I think another problem is the quality of the Corbyn team. They're just an embarrassment.
Well, why do you say that, John?
Well, what about Lady Thornbury of Rochester? That one isn't going to go away, is it? The hilarious Nick Ferrari car crash with Diane Abbott, with the £8,000 a year coppers, and then old MacDonald and his collective farms.
Right.
Another car crash today that you've told our listeners about. Yeah, I won't repeat it.
Yeah, well, let's repeat it, John, because people, you know, switch onto this show at various times. They finish work or getting in the car or whatever. So the Shadow Chancellor was asked this morning on the BBC, what was, a very simple question, what was the national debt running at? He hedged and hedged and hedged. It's alleged he got his mobile device out, went onto Wikipedia, found the figure of 70 billion, which is a year out of date. It's actually 52 billion. John, whichever way you cut it, I would agree with you, John. They're not very good at sums. But let me just ask you one final question for a thought. How did you think that Corbyn himself performed today?
Well, I don't like the guy, but I thought he did very well in terms of delivery.
Do you know what, John? I've criticised him on this show. I said, the chap can't do his tie up, and, you know, but actually, I was struck, John, that today there was some great passion in what he had to say. John, I thank you for your call, and I go to Ben in Haringey. Ben, are you sold on a Labour manifesto?
I think it's wonderful. I've
wonderful.
Waited all my life. I've waited since the last had a decent Labour government to bring in something like this. If you look at all of it, I love all of it. Particular things that will win votes is the nurses getting a pay rise. Another thing, the pay cap. I mean, I was working for a local authority and I didn't have a pay rise for 7 years. And when I got one, it was 1%, and then inflation destroyed that. So I still didn't get a pay rise for 8 years.
Sure.
So, you know, it can only go so far. And more money...
Ben, can I ask you, Ben? Ben, can I ask you, are you a long-term Labour voter?
Yes, I am. I wasn't keen on Corbyn, but I'm warming to him because the man comes across as a genuine, decent man who wants to do the best for the country. Okay. And especially today when he was on fire. It's phenomenal. But tuition fees will be very, very popular, and it will win votes. the triple lock on pensions, the old age pensioners still getting their 2.5% minimum rise. That will stay. You'll get a lot of pensioners, folks. The hated bedroom tax, which destroyed...
Ben, where's the money going to come from, mate?
Well, if you look at all the offshore islands that Britain sustains, like the Cayman Islands and all these offshore islands where the rich are stuffing their money and not actually paying tax in this country, and the electricity and gas and water money going out of the country to nationalise industry abroad. It's totally crazy. You get French taxpayers living in our money.
But you can't, Ben.
On fleecing us at home with gas, water, and
but you can't repatriate. You can't forcibly repatriate money sitting in the Cayman Islands, can you?
The money will stay in the country. The money will stay in the country, and I know they should have investigators go into the whole lot, and of course that would be a massive scandal because there would loads of politicians would be in jail, because of the fiddles they must have done.
But Ben, you cannot stop people, Ben, sending honestly earned money out of the country to any part of the world they choose, it seems to me. But anyway, let's not have a fight over that. Ben loves this manifesto. He thinks it's eye-watering, it's really going to catch people's imagination, and we're going to be analysing every one of the major party manifesto launches. Today it's Labour. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. In some ways, Jeremy Corbyn's had a very good day up in Bradford. He's launched this Labour manifesto, and he's done it with a bit of gusto and a bit of style. I think in some ways we've seen a slightly different side to him today. I sense he's really enjoying the election campaign. They may be 20 points ahead in the polls, or 18, whichever you believe, but actually he quite likes being out there and doing it. And your texts and tweets still flooding in. The Labour manifesto sounds wonderful. Just can't help wondering how long before the country's bankrupt. The money tree is the one the Tories grow from all our hard work and take the fruit for themselves. I'm working class, and Corbyn doesn't speak for me. He never has, and he never will. All political parties need to wake up to common sense. Any infrastructure critical to daily life should always be publicly owned and run. Well, I think there are many that would argue, actually, the railways, when they were in state hands, weren't universally popular, but, you know, it's as broad as it's long. Jackie in Bournemouth. Jackie, what did you make of Mr. Corbyn today? And does this manifesto, do you think it could actually close the gap on the Conservatives?
No. What I think is the Conservatives could take all the best parts of his manifesto and all the best parts of the UKIP manifesto and use all those to please everybody. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Well, actually, Jackie, isn't that what Theresa May's doing already?
That's right.
She's talk about over-promising. It's been remarkable so far, hasn't it?
Yes, I think she should do that. And I think, Nigel, they should make you a saint. I think they should canonise you. Saint Nigel, that's what we call you here.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Jackie. So tell me something. Are you tempted to vote for Jeremy Corbyn after today?
Not really.
Not really.
I just like some of his bits and pieces, but, you know, well, how would he get his money for that? Well, I thought he doesn't want war or fighting, so they could cancel Trident, couldn't they? Because he doesn't want battle.
Well, actually, Trident. It was very clear in the manifesto that Labour will support Trident, which of course is a battle that he's lost with his own party. But I think had they gone for getting rid of Trident, that would, Jackie, have been the news headline tonight. Whereas the news headline, you know, amongst higher taxes, but actually the abolition of tuition fees is a real standout policy, isn't it?
Oh, yes. That's a very big deal, isn't it?
Yeah,
yes,
it is.
Students don't get a job even once they've got their degrees, so it's a double whammy, isn't it? It's doubly bad, rather.
Well, if they don't get a job, they're not forced to repay until they earn a certain amount. But you know, tuition fees have been pretty unpopular, and certainly unpopular at £9,000 a year. Jackie in Bournemouth is not convinced, but I thank her very much for the call. Carol says on Facebook, Corbyn is a rich kid trying to help the poor. Has he ever had a proper job in his life? I think I might have used that line once or twice before. Prep school, then private school, don't believe him. I don't think he went to private school, actually. I think he went to grammar school. Rich says on Facebook, 92 billion on a railway line nobody wants. No, Labour want to extend it right up to Scotland. You'd get there very quickly. Daniel says, Corbyn telling us what we want to hear. So did Cameron. The only difference is Corbyn might not have his fingers crossed behind his back. Oh, Daniel, that really is cutting about my old friend, David Cameron. And Pamela says, I love the way Labour pluck these figures out of thin air. Well, do you know what? They could take some lessons from my friends here in Strasbourg, who, the last time I spoke here, I said, where did you get this figure of 60 billion euros that you want us to pay to leave? You've plucked it out of the air. Do you know what? They've now increased it to 100 billion. We might have a little chat about that tomorrow. Andrew in Wigan, has the Labour manifesto won you over?
No, Nigel.
Right, okay.
However, I really liked his speech. I've always been a Labour supporter, been brought up in a council estate all my life, and I've been educated, got a degree. However, I think the overriding factor in this is Brexit. There's not been one mention in his speech about Brexit, and that surely has to determine how much he can afford to spend.
Well, he does know. I mean, he did say in this manifesto that, you know, we voted to leave and we will leave. But then he goes on saying that we'll stay opted into this and opted into that. And you wonder at the end of the day, we'll stay part of the European Medicines Agency. We'll stay part of Euratom.
It's a bit namby-pamby, though, isn't it? It's not committed.
I think the problem that Labour have had in this Brexit election is the simple lack of clarity on this issue. That's been their problem all the way through.
I agree. Yeah.
But I think what Labour were trying to do today was to say, look, let's move this debate on to other things like education and health. That is what this manifesto launch was about.
Sorry. Yeah.
Well,
good.
Yeah.
And I agree with everything he said, basically, but I shan't be voting for him. But there was no mention of the disaffected communities that were left behind. And I think that's why the UK voted to leave the EU, because they've been long gone forgotten.
Oh, yeah. And particularly in your part of the world. You know, it was those northern towns, they felt ignored. They felt that irresponsible open-door immigration had changed their communities, had made it hard to get a GP appointment. No, but I completely understand why they did it. But I'm fascinated. No one is talking about immigration in this election when it dominated last year in the referendum.
Quite right, I know. I'd like to just point out as well that a lot of people, when it came to the results of the referendum, the early morning, and they were announcing it on the BBC, saying it was largely working class towns, uneducated.
Oh, yes.
I'd like to point out that people don't need to be educated to be intelligent. That is just so snobby, and I don't know, I think it just gets on my nerves.
Oh, Andrew, we're ill-educated, we don't wash very often, we're awful people, we really ought to be more like them, I know. And actually, in the referendum itself, the best example of that was Sir Bob Geldof sticking a two-finger sign up, not just to me, but to Britain's working men and women in the fishing community, and it rather summed things up. Andrew, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Well, my final thought on all of this is Corbyn today, we saw a different side of him. He did deliver a good speech with passion and with gusto. There are some really eye-catching ideas in this that people will be talking about. It's taken the debate, at least for today, away from Brexit, which many will view as actually being a little bit of mild relief after what we've been talking about for some time. But I'm afraid my own view is that it's back to the old ideas. It's back to renationalisation. It's back to high tax. It's back to a lot of state control. And it worries me. It worries me how a free enterprise economy that needs to make profits, that needs to make money. Otherwise, we can't pay for the schools and hospitals. It worries me what that would do. That's my concern. Now, don't forget, you can still register for tickets to come to my roadshow next week by going to lbc.co.uk. I'm going to be live from Manchester, Birmingham, Newcastle and Glasgow, and you can be part of this discussion too. That's the Nigel Farage Roadshow, all next week, only on LBC. Tonight, you've been listening to me here from Strasbourg. I'll be back tomorrow evening from 7, having done battle with Mr Juncker. Coming up at 10, it's Majid Nawaz, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you, and we're going to continue this conversation about Labour.
Downing Street with Theresa May. More of that later on in the show. But I guess Brexit, the Brexit negotiations, the final deal is also dominating UK politics today with the Liberal Democrat manifesto. Now, Tim Farron hasn't yet launched the manifesto. He will do so within minutes, but we do know very large chunks of it. And absolutely, the central point is he wants a second EU referendum on the final Brexit deal. There's much else there as well. There's an extra penny on the pound to fund money for the NHS and social care services. There is the decriminalisation and sale of cannabis, which they say will raise an extra £1 billion a year. There's a big pitch to young voters. They're saying that under 21s would get much cheaper bus passes, and they would also, under the age of 21, still qualify for housing benefit. But be in no mistake, the absolute centrepiece of this whole campaign, led by Tim Farron, is about Brexit. And I quote, "Imagine a brighter future. You don't have to accept Theresa May and Nigel Farage's extreme version of Brexit that will wreck the future for you, your family, your schools and hospitals in the biggest fight for the future of our country in a generation." So that is what Tim Farron is about to say. And I'm asking you, will their manifesto clinch your vote in this general election? So if you think, thank you, Mr Farron, I'd love another EU referendum, then call me on 0345 60 60 973. If you think, oh no, not another referendum, then please text 84850. Or if you want to comment on any other aspect of the Lib Dem manifesto, and indeed how you think they're doing in this campaign, then using the hashtag Farage and LBC, tweet at LBC. Please get involved, let me know what you think, and as ever, you can watch the show live. Just go to LBC's Facebook page. Now, last night we allowed you to have your say on the Labour manifesto. Tomorrow, it'll be the turn of the Conservatives. But tonight, can we please, if we can, focus on the Liberal Democrats? And I'm going to ask Tony in Heathrow what he, I mean, albeit he hasn't delivered it yet, but what he makes of what we believe Tim Farron's about to say.
Well, it's lovely to speak to you, Nigel.
Good evening.
I've voted since I was 18, and I'm now 69. But can the Liberal Democrats be taken to court for Trade Description Act, as I believe they are not Democrats? The vote was for Brexit, end of story.
So you're saying that the vote... Well, OK, let me try and play devil's advocate, if I can. I have to confess on this subject, tough for me. But what Farron has been arguing now for the best part of a year is that we didn't vote to leave the single market. That is the argument that Farron is putting.
Sorry.
Why do you think we did?
Because everybody, the politicians and yourself, who I listen to all the time, and I've voted for you the last few years, said this. We would leave.
Well, Tony, I have to say that I agree with you. And I'm going to put it out there to any Lib Dem supporter or MP or anybody, because actually, Tony in Heathrow, and I thank you for your call, Tony is right in this sense that every single major player on both the Remain and the Leave side said that if we vote for Brexit, we'll be leaving the single market. And those of us on the Brexit side thought it was a good thing, and those on the Remain side thought it would be a disaster. And in fact, Tim Farron thinks it's such a disaster, and I'm going to quote this again. He says that Brexit and leaving the single market will wreck the future for you, your family, your schools and hospitals. So I have to say, I might not agree with Tim Farron, but it's strong language, there's a lot of passion, and without doubt, Tim Farron does try hard. Very hard. Some would say too hard, but he's been going all around the country on that coach, and to be fair to him, he actually goes and meets voters, and I rather like that. We're staying in Heathrow, but we're going to Matthew now. Matthew, good evening. Does this Lib Dem manifesto help their campaign?
Well, basically, Nigel, evening. I'm Remainer, accepted we've got to get on and get a better deal with Europe, but basically, I mean, Theresa May said, I mean, this election is about Brexit, so this is the second referendum we're having. Basically, I mean, I'm going to be voting for the Liberal Democrats because I wanted to have a coalition government so we could get more people involved in the negotiations. And because the most important thing is we've got to get that free trade deal with Europe, because we're not going to get any free trade deals with the rest of the world and just turn our backs to the whole of Europe. We've got to have more parties involved.
Well, as far as the rest of the world's concerned, Matthew, you know, there are countries queuing up saying they want a free trade deal with us. African countries, the American administration, etc. As far as the EU's concerned, well, I'll talk about that after the 7:30 news, because that was really the centrepiece of what we were discussing in this Parliament today. And you're quite right. I mean, the ideal position would be that we would have a tariff-free deal with the European Union, such as the one they've just negotiated with Canada. Whether that's possible or not, we'll discuss a bit later. But can I ask you, Matthew, did you think the coalition from 2010 to 15 was a success?
Well, I mean, I think the Brexit issue wasn't on the table then, and I mean that we've got to get that right. And I mean, I think, you know, really all the UKIP supporters should try to vote for UKIP. I mean, I want more people involved, more MPs, and really everyone. It should be a cross-party affair. The Brexit negotiations. The first referendum was cross-party, and you know, Theresa May is just trying to sort of make political gain, and you know, that's why she's not going to be getting my vote this time. And I'm hoping, you know, everyone will vote for, you know, whatever MPs in their area what's got a better chance against Conservatives. So I want to reverse the decision. I mean, I think we're going to leave, but we've got to do that deal. You know, we can't walk away with no deal. I mean, that's the disaster. No one from the rest of the world we're not going to get a free trade deal with the rest of the world and just turn our backs with all the work. Because if we get a free trade deal with Europe, then basically, if we do another free trade deal with another country, they've got to also at the same time do it with Europe. Otherwise, it's not going to work. We're not going to be able to deal with America.
Matthew, Switzerland have got more free trade deals around the world than they've negotiated in their own right as a relatively small, though prosperous country, than we've got as members of the European Union. So I wouldn't be negative at all about our ability to do deals with the rest of the world. But you are a switcher, aren't you? You're switching from Tory to the Lib Dems in this election.
Coalition there, and you know, I really want you to be on the negotiation table as well. That's what, you know, hopefully UKIP will then get you more involved if they get more MPs, and you know, if there is a coalition, and hopefully, who knows, it might be a coalition with Conservative and UKIP if enough people vote for UKIP and the Conservatives don't get a majority. So I mean, I'm not trying to reverse the decision.
No. Okay, fine. I get that. One final question for you, Matthew. Would you like us to have a referendum on whatever the shape of the deal is in 2 to 3 years' time?
Well, no. I mean, I think if it's a cross-party, we got all the main parties at the table, and we get the best deal we can, as long as we do get this free trade deal with Europe, and then we can build on that with free trade deals with the rest of the world. But as long as we're not paying, if we're paying, you know, we're going to have to pay to get this free trade deal. If it's less than we're paying now, it's a good deal. I mean, obviously, we want to pay as less as possible. We're already out of the Euro, Schengen, so, you know, we've got to work together, everyone, to get this free trade deal with Europe.
Matthew, I like your collegiate approach to politics in the middle of a tribal election campaign. You've risen above much of the argument out there, and I thank you. Trevor, in Wembley, does the Lib Dem manifesto impress you?
No, it doesn't, especially this idea of decriminalising cannabis. I mean, what irresponsible thing to even suggest. I mean, you know, we don't want, I mean, you know, we got enough problems in this country with people drink driving and so on, you know, and taking other drugs. But the idea of, you know, allowing people to basically just get stoned whenever they want, you know, I expect so much more from a political party, you know.
Okay,
and plus they're just doing this just because they want. It's a clever way to get more, you know, tax revenue, you know.
Well, it would get some tax revenue. I think, Trevor, it would also be seen as a pitch to the young, as indeed are cheap bus passes for the young and housing maintenance for under 21s. But I mean, several states in America have now decriminalised cannabis. You can buy it in Portugal freely, you can buy it in Switzerland freely, but what you're really saying is you don't think that's right for our country.
Yeah, it's not right, because what we should be aiming towards is to a drug-free, you know, to try and you know, help people to stop using drugs. Look at the amount of people that have died from smoking tobacco. I mean, you know, and then the strain that it puts on the NHS. They spend billions treating people with smoking-related diseases, and here you got a party suggesting that you know, smoking cannabis should be decriminalised. It's ridiculous. It's irresponsible.
But you would at least, Trevor, you would at least, because, you know, people can buy cannabis now very easily, very freely. Not just in the centre of London, you know, in a small village in North Cornwall. If you want to buy this stuff, you can, but you're buying it from people who are criminal. And there is an argument, Trevor, that if you sell it in the local pharmacy or a registered shop, that actually you control the quality and you take the criminals out of it. That is the argument, Trevor, for decriminalising.
Yeah, but, you know, you got to think about young children as well, Nigel. You know, what sort of country do you want them to grow up in? A country where everything is just, you know, all the things that were bad for a long time are suddenly becoming acceptable, you know.
Okay. No, Trevor, I get your passion in this. Can I just ask you something? If the Liberal Democrats had not put this in their manifesto, would you have been tempted to vote for them?
Only if they, you know, if they say things that, you know, convince me that they take, you know, governing a country seriously. I can't take a party seriously if they're going to come up with an idea of legalizing cannabis.
One last quick question, Trevor. Do you want to see a second referendum on our membership of the European Union when the negotiations have concluded?
Well, yes, because a lot of people want to stay in the EU, yeah. So I do, yes.
Okay. No, Trevor, thank you. So, Trevor, very much a caller there who is attracted by the Lib Dems' main policy, but somewhat put off by the pledge on cannabis. Last night we allowed you to have your say on the Labour manifesto. Tomorrow you can say what you want to say on the Conservative manifesto. Tonight we're focusing on the Lib Dem manifesto. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg, and it's 7:15.
I say met. He came up to me in the street and he started shouting at me. You might have seen it on the news or on the internet. In the end, we actually got along, but he was angry at me for not getting behind Theresa May and backing Brexit. Now, I think I calmed him down a bit when we spoke, but I'm fairly sure I didn't change his mind. And that is fine. You see, when last year's referendum took place, I campaigned harder than anyone else to remain, perhaps apart from you, but I believed passionately that our children would have a brighter future in Britain if Britain remained in the European Union.
So we're listening to Tim Farron. He is launching his manifesto as I speak.
And I accept that. But that does not mean that I have changed what I believe. I believe that our children will have a brighter future if we are inside the European Union, that they will be safer and better off, that our economy will be stronger and our country will have more influence in the world. But just because I believe that does not mean that I think that people who voted to leave are bad people. Of course they're not. We just disagree. You see, I grew up in Preston, in Lancashire, and most folks in Preston voted to leave. There are parts of Lancashire where 2/3 of the people voted to leave. Friends of mine did. Members of my family did. They don't all admit to it. They don't do it to my face. But I know that they did, because you told my sister, didn't you? Anyway, they are... Pretend otherwise. These people, they're my people. I love those people. They are good people. They are decent people. And as it happens, I liked Malcolm too, once he stopped shouting at me. But here is the difference between me and Theresa May. I want Malcolm, everyone here, everyone in Preston, every single one of you to have your say over what comes next. Nobody knows what Brexit will look like. The choices Theresa May will make will affect your life and our country for decades. Your shop, your weekly shop, your job, your environment, your safety, where you can travel to and where you can live. And she is already making choices that will affect those things, including the most profound choice she could make, taking Britain out of the single market. That decision alone is a time bomb under our economy. And when it blows up, it is going to take down our NHS and our schools with it. It is going to wreck our children's future for decades to come, and it is a choice, her choice, plain and simple. It was not inevitable. There was nothing on the ballot paper last June that said we were choosing to pull out of the single market. There are other countries that are outside the EU and inside the single market. Just look at Norway or Switzerland. There was nothing on that ballot paper that said that people and families from Europe who have made this country their home will be left in limbo, not knowing if they can stay in the country they've raised their kids in. And there was definitely nothing on that ballot paper that said we would turn our friends, our neighbours, our allies into enemies. And yet here we are, with our government making accusations of our neighbours and even threatening war with Spain. The choices Theresa May makes and the compromises she negotiates with the bureaucrats in Brussels will affect our children's future for decades to come. My children, your children, Malcolm's grandchildren. In June last year, we voted for a departure, but we did not vote for a destination. So I want you to have your choice over your future.
Well, there we are. There we are. We've heard the big pitch there from Tim Farron. What can I say? Well, have to be honest, he got the audience laughing. There was a bit of humour, there's a bit of self-deprecation, and that's good. And there's certainly passion. But actually, what he was saying was that it wasn't just leaving the single market that worried him. Actually, leaving the EU worries him, full stop. He wants us to have a second chance to perhaps reverse what we decided to do last year. The one very condescending bit was that not all of us that voted for Brexit are bad people. Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Tim. But so you can see that the Lib Dem pitch, and yes, there are lots of other things in the manifesto. I talked about some of them. You know, there are others. They want to end the 1% public sector pay cap. They want an extra $7 billion put into education. They want a ban on the sale of diesel cars and vans in the UK by 2025. So there are lots of other policies here. But Brexit is at the centre of it, fighting to keep Britain in the single market and to have that second referendum and to avoid Theresa May and Nigel Farage's extreme version of Brexit. And I wonder whether Cameron in Pimlico is influenced by that. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
I'd like to kind of try and play devil's advocate without, well, whilst attempting to not reveal my party's preference.
Okay.
Surely a second vote only provides clarity on the decision and confidence on the decision, whether you're for or against. I know plenty of people on both sides of the discussion, plenty of people who, knowing now how Europe has reacted to our first referendum and knowing how it's being handled, would rather leave because they've had an entire year of information. So whether you're for or against the referendum, a second referendum is surely the most democratic act that we can do to finalise and firm up the decision. If the second referendum votes to leave, that just puts confidence in every single person who took part in that campaign, because they know that it wasn't just a one-time fluke. It was a decision the entire country made to leave. And if it's for or against, those people who voted to leave now have a chance to make their argument. It's an entire
Cameron, there is a long tradition of this, because the Danes voted against the Maastricht Treaty back in the early 1990s and were forced to vote again. Twice the Irish have rejected European treaties and been forced to vote again, and that's what I see certain pro-EU political voices trying to do with us. Let me tell you, Cameron, what I think the problem is. Let's say that the Lib Dems didn't win the election, because that's not going to happen, but let's say that we're back to 2010. Let's say the Lib Dems can go into a coalition government. Their price of going into that coalition would be a promise of a second referendum. As soon as a British government puts that on the table, there is then no incentive for anybody in the European Union to give us any deal of any kind whatsoever, because they'll think that if we get an absolutely zero deal, that we'll reverse our decision in 2 years' time. And that's what I think, and I challenge you, Cameron, or anybody to tell me I'm wrong on that.
No, I would completely agree that the timing of this is not positive in any aspect. If we were to even hint towards early polls suggesting that we were going to change our minds and actually stay, that would force the EU's hand to firm up their negotiators to force that hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's right.
When previous callers state that someone's not democratic because they're calling for another vote, surely that is the democrat. It might not be the most correct decision, it might not be the best timing, but it is something that would reaffirm so many people who are going into this with doubt, whether they're voting on the left or the right or however it might be.
I think a critic of the Liberal Democrats would say that they failed to accept the referendum result last year, and so they're asking for a rematch. As far as I was aware, last year wasn't the best out of three.
Yeah, and I can't say what's right or wrong. I can't say who is correct in their decision. What I can say is that in 10 years' time, whatever the decision was, if we got it wrong in any aspect, leaving or staying, someone may have said, well, that second referendum, that might look good because we might have changed our mind. I'm not saying it's correct. I'm just saying that it's the democratic way forward. And in order to affirm the decision and create confidence with the voters and the parties alike, a second referendum would be the easiest way to set people's minds at ease.
All I would say is that for those of us that wanted a chance to vote to leave, we had to wait 40 years, and now it's the other way round. They want a rematch within the space of 3 years. Cameron, I thank you for giving your very objective point of view. Charlotte in the Forest of Dean. Charlotte, are you a Lib Dem supporter?
No.
Right, okay.
Definitely not.
Okay.
I'm a Brexiter. I'm a very enthusiastic Brexiter, and having looked, the Lib Dem had with their manifesto out today. To be honest with you, I can't see how they are going to endear themselves to people who aren't already committed to the Lib Dem cause, because there are policies there that aren't going to attract, or in fact, they're going to repel any sensible voters, because there is nothing there for them to actually get any positive out on, because they want to they want to have a second referendum on Brexit. They still want to have immigration into this country, especially with the man children, as I call them, from Syria. the 13-year-olds who are 40. I mean that's basically what
You're so cynical. You're so cynical. Some of them were only 35, Charlotte.
Oh, well, mere striplings then, aren't they, Nigel?
Quite right.
But I can't see how that's going to go, because the thing is that him and Clegg have been some kind of tag team. I mean, if you look all over the media, especially on the politics shows, they've been rolled about by all the media organisations saying, we respect the decision, but, we have to have a second referendum. or we have to, we understand, but actually we really want to remain because all these terrible things are going to happen if we don't. And I think people are getting tired of it, Nigel. I'm sick to death of it, to be quite honest with you. Because it's like Chinese water torture. It's drip, 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 and people are just going to turn off. People are just going to shut off.
So do you think, Charlotte, I mean, the Liberal Democrats were hoping for, expecting, and one or two early opinion polls showed they might be having quite a big bounce in the opinion polls. Right at the minute, if we believe the polls, that doesn't appear to be happening. So you're basically saying that you think this manifesto will put off as many as it will attract.
It's not going to attract people like myself. Who want completely out, because it didn't say on the form, leave, but we're going to remain in a single market. It was either leave or remain, and as far as I'm concerned, leave means leave. Get out. We wanted to leave.
Charlotte, I can't really argue with that, can I? Coming from where I'm coming from, I think it was fairly clear as well. Charlotte, thank you very much for your call. Jeremy on Facebook disagrees with Charlotte. Jeremy says, excellent, well thought out plans, well done the Lib Dems. Paul says, Liberal non-Democrats are playing the long game. Decriminalise cannabis, second EU referendum, etc., catching the young voters. They're the up-and-coming voters. Well, they also, of course, I think would reduce the voting age to 16. So, Paul, you're right. This manifesto is a big pitch to youth, and I can see that very, very clearly. Janice says we cannot have a referendum on everything that's put on the table. Well, some people think we can. I'm going to go very quickly to Ron in Bethnal Green. Ron, have they advanced their cause, the Lib Dems, with this manifesto today?
I think so, Nigel. Firstly, I want to say I'm not a man who's right into his politics. I'm just a normal working man who gets involved when I can. And now, to be honest, I'm getting a bit fatigued with it all anyway, voting every other month. But,
yeah, a lot of people are, Rod.
Yeah, well, the one thing that lived out, I must admit, you called earlier as objective against the cannabis legalisation. I'm all for that, but I know you like focusing on Brexit and stuff like that. But with regards to Brexit, I mean, Cameron gave us a referendum and then ducked out of when it didn't go his way, and also you stepped down as soon. I like you, to be honest with you. I think you speak sense and you speak to people like me. But you took us to the edge and then stepped down, and now I feel that Theresa May, who stepped in as a Remainer, is just going to do whatever she pleases because she is a Remainer deep down, you know what I mean?
Well, you may be right. I mean, she doesn't sound like a Remainer, and we'll examine that, Ron, tomorrow night. We are clear where Tim Farron stands on all of this, and he wants a second referendum, and you do as well, and I completely understand that. Just a quick defence of myself, Ron. I haven't stepped down. I haven't gone away. I've been doing Brexit battle in the European Parliament today, and you'll hear more of it in a couple of minutes. Ron, I thank you for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg. It's 7:30. Well, it's not just Tim Farron that is talking today about Brexit with passion, because the European Parliament met today to discuss Brexit, and they were all here, all the bigwigs, Monsieur Barnier, Verhofstadt, the negotiators, Mr Tusk from the European Council, and, of course, the big cheese himself, Mr Juncker from the European Commission. And this, of course, follows the Downing Street dinner. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago, Mr Juncker came to Downing Street, and within hours of the dinner finishing, he'd said all sorts of things about his host, the food, etc. This is what I had to say this morning.
Imagine you invited a very important guest round for dinner, and you made all the preparations, and there were some very important, confidential conversations that needed to be had, and you thought everything had gone well, and yet, within hours, your guest had told the outside world that you, the host, were deluded. And then all the contents of the conversation were blabbed to an opposition newspaper, and to add insult to injury, you say the food wasn't actually very good either. I don't know, Mr Juncker, whether this is how you carry on in Luxembourg. I doubt it, because in any other part of the civilised world, frankly, that behaviour would be considered to be bloody rude. Your attempt to bully the Brits through this negotiation is not working.
Well, I have to say that it's very difficult here because, basically, they're in denial. Even though we voted to leave, even though we've triggered Article 50, they think that if they play hardball with us if they make a series of totally impossible demands that actually Brexit won't happen and the voice of Tony Blair and Tim Farron will come through. And I do stand by what I said. I think what he did to Theresa May was a terrible, horrible, damning insult. But please, any listeners that think I'm wrong and think that what Mr Juncker did post that dinner was right, do let me know. And this is really, in a sense, what I'm saying about Tim Farron, that if we had a government or a coalition government that was promising a second referendum, we would play even more into that agenda of don't give the Brits a deal, because then they'll have a second referendum and they'll reverse the first one. I feel very strongly that that's where we are. I wonder what Aaron in Sevenoaks makes of all that.
Yeah, good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
Tim Farron, good evening to you. Tim Farron has said that he didn't vote to come out of the single market. Now, well, okay, that's all. Well, let's give him this one. The secretaries, under the Referendum Act, the Secretary of State was obliged to put a document before Parliament, publish a document and put it before Parliament, which outlines the information about membership of the EU. Now, he did that in April of 2016. Now, that document having gone before Parliament, Tim Farron must have known about that document because it's a legal requirement. So in that document, it outlines all the membership, the criteria, the full membership of the benefits. It talks about the four pillars: the freedom of movement, the single market, all that kind of thing. Now, if we vote to come out of that, it talks about full membership. It doesn't talk about qualified membership or part membership. If we vote to come out, he must know that that document no longer applies. In other words, we no longer accept the terms of that document. So therefore, what he is saying is, I didn't vote to come out, but he must have known the criteria. If he hasn't read that document, the question I would put to him is, why not?
Well, on his never-ending coach tour of the country, which I compliment him for, I hope he comes to Sevenoaks, and I hope you get the chance to ask him that. Look, I think he's in denial as well, isn't he? I mean, he makes his points about the single market, but he said in that speech, and we heard the clips of it earlier on the show, you know, he regrets the decision. He's not accepting of a democratic vote. He regrets it, and he actually wants to reverse it.
Well, but it's in black and white. I mean, it's in the act. The Secretary of State, fully complied with what he had to do. He put the document before Parliament on, I think it went in April of 2016. Now, if you read that document, it is information about the membership, which includes all the four pillars and all the other ancillaries that go with it. Now, he must know that document is in existence. He must have read it, and he must know that full membership means full acceptance of the terms of that document. If we have no longer full membership, it's a redundant document, and we start again, which is exactly what the Prime Minister is doing.
Which is exactly what the renegotiation is all about. Aaron, I thank you. Factual, and I believe absolutely correct. By text I get, why doesn't Tim Farron accept the Brexit vote? God knows the PM outlined what was at stake before the vote. The people can't keep voting because he doesn't like the result. And that's what Joyce from London says. And on Twitter I get, we voted. That is a decision. If we are forced to vote again, then surely a vote doesn't count. Frank says on Facebook, Tim Farron is an opportunist who has little faith in his own policies. Liberals are no Democrats, nor liberal, as they continue to want to ban things, including free speech. Well, actually, Frank, is he really an opportunist? I mean, you could argue that in this election he's going for the chunk of the electorate that don't like the Brexit result. But I think, to be honest, he's always believed this. You know, when I've met Tim Farron over the years, he, Clegg, and the others in the Lib Dems, I mean, they are fanatical believers in the European project. They were fanatical believers in Britain joining the euro. I remember debating with them, nearly 20 years ago, and we were told if we didn't join the euro, we'd be left behind. So I think actually, with this Liberal Democrat Party, since the early 1990s, whether it's Paddy Ashdown, whether it was the late Charlie Kennedy, I think they've all been very consistent that they believe in the European project. And on that, I don't think it's fair to call him opportunist. We're going to go to Simon in Bermondsey. Now, there is a well-known Simon from the Liberal Democrats in Bermondsey who was an MP. It's not you, is it?
It's not me, although he does sit quite close to me.
Okay, sorry for teasing. Good evening. So, does this manifesto, is this going to lead to the big Lib Dem bounce?
I don't think it will, no. I think people can see straight through what he's trying to do. He says we voted for a departure and not a destination, but we can all see he's trying to reverse that decision to leave totally. And I think that it's fundamentally immoral, really, because if you consider how divided the country was a year ago, I mean, people fell out as friends, families were arguing, couples broke up, and he wants to sort of reopen all those wounds, which haven't healed yet. I mean, we still haven't left. People are still very much divided on this, and he wants to go back to that point where...
Do you feel, Simon, that a year on, and yeah, you're right. I mean, look, I was in the middle of it all. You know, I know how strong passions were on both sides of it. Do you think a year on that actually those divisions are healing?
A little bit. But, you know, I still sense quite a lot of bigotry out there, especially from, I mean, it was really at a height after the vote where people were calling us, you know, racist and, you know, people were suggesting that the old people's vote shouldn't count as much because they're going to die sooner and stuff like that. It was disgusting things were coming out.
Yeah. And poor people.
Yeah.
I mean, why on earth are the working classes? Why have these poor people who don't wash very often got the vote? That was the kind of thing that we were subjected to.
And I'd be interested to talk to you, Nigel, as well, because I think it's quite a strength of Theresa May that she was for Remain, and she's sort of seen that for the stability of the country, she should back the majority, even though she believes that in Remain deep down. And I don't know whether I know you're quite sceptical about her sort of conversion, but perhaps it's a good thing for a Remainer that's showing the country, look, I was for Remain, but now I'm for the stability of the country, to heal the country and make sure that we don't have, you know, riots on the street, but we're going to go with the majority.
Well, Simon, I've said twice on this show that we're not discussing the Conservatives tonight, but you put so much bait down that I can't resist it. Look, if she is a genuine convert to Brexit for reasons of democracy, stability, respecting people's views, and she can now see the advantages, then that is tremendous. If, however, she is deep down a Remainer, and one previous caller tonight suggested that too, and she's doing this to win votes in an election and doesn't deliver the kind of Brexit people thought they were voting for, then wow, politics could be very interesting in a couple, you know, in sort of 2 or 3 years' time. So, Simon, you're unconvinced by this Lib Dem manifesto, and you kind of think they're not going to go far in this election, yeah?
That's right, yeah, and I think that, you know, Jeremy Corbyn has basically said that he's going to leave. I mean, he hasn't come out and said he's going to leave, but his policies about nationalisation can only be done if you leave anyway.
Of course, yes. Yeah. So you think, well, the one thing I suppose we can say, Simon, about Tim Farron's manifesto is that it is utterly distinct and clear. There is no confusion on the biggest issue of this election, where the Democrats stand. And I thank you very much indeed for your call. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg. It's 7:45. For the last 5 months on my show, I've been listening to what you've got to say about the big issues. Well, next week, I'm going to come out and try and meet some of you face to face. We're going to be doing a road show up and down the country, and I'm going to be in Manchester on Monday, Birmingham on Tuesday, Newcastle on Wednesday, and Glasgow on Thursday. I want to hear from you, and if you've got a big burning issue you want to share with the nation, then try and get yourself involved with our studio audience. To book tickets, go to lbc.co.uk and be part of the conversation. That's the Nigel Farage Roadshow, all next week, only on LBC. Back to our main theme of today, which is the European Union, and it's Tim Farron's very passionate belief that leaving the EU, and particularly leaving the single market, would be an absolute disaster that will wreck the future for you, your family, your schools and your hospitals. And he's saying, vote for me, vote Lib Dem, and we will give you a second referendum at the end of the Brexit talks. And that is his big pitch. There are many other policies too, but that's his big pitch to the British people. I'm going to ask Victor in Dorking whether he's convinced by that and whether he's going to vote for it.
I certainly am not, Nigel.
Right.
Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately for poor dear old little Timmy, Mrs. Gina Miller has shot his fox.
Right.
Because Lord Panic, when arguing his case in the Supreme Court, insisted that the reason an Act of Parliament was needed to trigger Article 50, and therefore us leaving the European Union, was that the decision was irrevocable. And the Lord Neuberger and the majority decision accepted that. They said that once we triggered Article 50, we would be leaving the European Union, and that is why we need an Act of Parliament to trigger it.
They did say that. You're absolutely right. Yes, you're absolutely right. So is Tim...
He can shout and scream as much as he wants. There's nothing he can do about it.
Yeah.
Even if we had another referendum, we'd still have to leave the European Union, because the triggering of Article 50 and leaving the European Union are both irrevocable. And in fact, the Attorney General actually agreed with that as well.
I mean, Victor, nothing is irrevocable, forever, obviously. But yeah, for this realistic period of the next couple of years, we have triggered it. I agree with you. It's part of our treaty deal with the European Union. It's pretty difficult to see that being changed. Although I would say to you, Victor, that there are people here in this organisation who would be very happy to see a referendum, very happy to see the UK reverse its decision. And here's one of the reasons why, Victor. The UK economy is bigger than the 20 smallest economies in the European Union. So the impact on the size of a single market isn't like one country leaving, it's in some ways like the 20 smallest countries leaving. So I do think, Victor, they could change their minds over here too. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but they call us Treasure Island anyway, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. So I think all this nonsense and fear-mongering that's still going on by the what I call the extreme Remoaners, it's basically sour grapes.
But Victor, what's wrong with you? Tim Farron is saying it will wreck the future for you, your family, your schools, your hospitals. I mean, where's your heart, man?
Oh yeah, I'm a retard, aren't I? I'm a uneducated retard. Yeah.
Victor, I'm afraid I really do think you are, but I thank you for your call. James in Clapham. James, good evening. Does the Liberal Democrat manifesto make you feel more inclined to vote for them?
Good evening, Nigel. No, Nigel, they remind me of basically the Japanese soldiers that were fighting in the Asian jungle 30 years after the war had finished, and nobody told them what had happened. They'd lost.
Now, that is hilarious, James, that you've said that, and let me tell you why.
That was somebody said to you at the Oxford debate with Mr. Clegg?
That's right. I did an Oxford Union debate, and it would have been February 2016. And on the other side, Mr. Barroso, the former European, so Juncker's predecessor from the European Commission, and Nick Clegg. And the mood in the room was overwhelmingly Remain. And all the predictions in the press, the pollsters, the bookmakers, was that Remain would win and win comfortably. And Clegg said to me, he said, Nigel will become like, when he loses this referendum, a Japanese soldier stuck on a Pacific island, not recognising that the war is over, whilst the rest of us get on with our lives. So it is, you think, James, now the boot's on the other foot, do you?
I do indeed. And to be honest with you, Nigel, the manifesto is a joke because they're not going to win. They're not going to go into coalition. What is the point of drafting that book of fiction?
Well, hang on. They did go into coalition, didn't they, in 2010? Well, they did in 2010, so we can't write it off as a joke. I mean, I know the opinion polls have changed, but they were, up until 2 years ago, in coalition government, and there was a Liberal Democrat deputy prime minister. So we can't write them off completely, can we?
We can, because basically when they were on when they were on Daily Politics this morning, he asked him to cost it. He said, "I can't cost it over a parliament. This is what we want to show the British people where we are going in the next 5 years." What a joke,
James. The Liberal Democrats are not alone in struggling with their costings in this general election. But no, your view is clear. I thank you for your call. Robert in Newton Abbot, the West Country, which the Liberal Democrats are talking about as a big potential target for them. Do you think this manifesto will make people in Devon and Cornwall more likely to vote Lib Dem?
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call. I'm actually originally from Dudley, and thank you very much for coming over there to explain it all to us last year.
Well, I enjoyed it. I always love going to Dudley. But you're in Newton Abbot now, Robert, and voting there, I guess.
I've moved down here to be with my kids in this place, but I still go back to Dudley, so I'm a double city person. About this second referendum, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, in negotiation, then you don't offer a way out for the opposition. You most certainly keep your cards close to your chest and walk away. Second referendum just tells them they can say what they want. They deliberately want to make sure they give you a horrible choice. So they need a second referendum. And as he's saying, if we do and we vote to go back in, then that's fine.
Yeah,
exactly.
I suppose, Robert, I'm with that because I've been arguing tonight that if there was the prospect of a second referendum, we would get nothing from these people here at all, and they would very much hope, in the light of that, we'd reverse our decision. So I think it's completely against the national interest to offer a second referendum for those reasons, but Tim Farron clearly believes that it's in the national interest to reverse that referendum last year. So at least he's being... he may be in denial, but at least he has been consistent politically over the years where he stands on the European question.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a good man, and Corbyn's a good man. We're surrounded by good people taking the wrong decision here. But I think the thing is, people don't want to have that second referendum, because otherwise it's like we give Theresa May a completely free hand in what she does. And I know she was a Remainer before, and now she's this and that.
Yeah.
But it means that we don't have any say in it, and I think that makes people really scared.
Well, but I repeat the point. If Theresa May was to change her mind tomorrow and say there's going to be a second referendum, we would then realistically have no chance of getting a deal here at all.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So Robert, you're not going to vote Lib Dem from the sounds of it?
No, I'll vote Conservative. But actually, also, Nigel, I would say you seem to be filling a void of lack of information. You're providing information, and in my opinion, you're giving an even-handed look. Things, but what I'm saying is a lot of people actually depend on you being even-handed and giving them true information. So,
well, Robert, I will do my absolute best through LBC to be even-handed, to allow both, and I respect all views. If they're sincerely held and put, I respect all views, and if we can on this show give people information and knowledge, we will try every day to do that. By text I think the question should be whether every single Brexit voter read that document. Tim Farron knew what he was voting for. That's why he voted Remain. Tom, well, come on. Voters don't read every document. Voters don't read party manifestos. Do you know what? They never have, and they never, ever will. And by tweet I completely agree with the caller, Trevor. We should never decriminalise cannabis. There are people that feel very strongly on both sides of that. On Facebook, Steve says 52-48 is not an overwhelming result for the Brexiteers, not like Macron and Le Pen. Now, that is an overwhelming result. Yeah, it is, although interestingly, Steve, in the first round of the French president election, 46.5% of voters voted for strong Eurosceptics. OK, now, we've had a go. We haven't really had a chance to dissect all of the Lib Dem manifesto, but we have, I think, talked a lot about the main core point. What do I think about this? Well, we had Matthew from Heathrow on, who said he was a Conservative and he will vote Liberal Democrat because he sincerely believes the referendum last year was a mistake. And I have no doubt that Tim Farron has sincerely held this view for his entire political career. But I think the problem they've got is this. Only 22% of the population in that YouGov poll the other day said they really thought the referendum was a mistake. And that means the Liberal Democrats are fishing now in a very small pond. If they were to get every one of those 22%, they would have a storming election. But I suspect that's very, very unlikely. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7. Coming up at 10, it's Majid Nawaz. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. And we're going to continue this conversation. Tim
the need for a strong economy. 2, responding to Brexit and a changing world. 3, tackling enduring social divisions. 4, responding to an ageing society. And 5, facing up to fast-changing technology.
So what's in the Tory manifesto? Well, Brexit, of course, is pretty important. We're going to exit the European single market and customs union and have a deep special partnership instead. We are going to stay part of some European programmes, and it may be reasonable for us to continue making some contributions. We're going to remain signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights for at least the next Parliament. I don't think on Brexit any particular thrills or spills or anything we hadn't seen before. On the economy, on government spending and borrowing, there's going to be a balanced budget by the middle of the next decade, we're told. On immigration, which of course has been in many ways the dominant issue in British politics for the last few years, guess what? They aim to reduce annual net migration to tens of thousands. But the issue that I think is causing most debate is what Theresa May calls the social care revolution. So how will this work in future? Well, people with assets, people with property, people with savings will have the first £100,000 of that absolutely protected. Previously, that figure was only about £25,000. So the good news for the elderly who've got savings is that actually a little bit more of your money, on the face of it, is going to be protected. That's the good news. The bad news for the elderly is that actually if you're receiving care at home, whether it's a district nurse or wherever it may be, you will then be expected to pay towards that. So you're not just going to be expected to pay money if you go into an old people's home, but you'll be expected to pay money for care at home. And I guess this has caused, from what I can see, and certainly Ian Dale's programme had a record number of phone calls this evening, the most they've had all year. This seems to be the one that is causing, the biggest issue. But it is definitely a different-looking Conservative Party. I think any comparisons between Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May would have died today. She's taken the party in many ways, economically, much more to the centre. And certainly giving the impression, for example, there's no guarantee that taxes won't go up for high earners, no guarantee at all. So it is probably the traditional Tory right that are feeling nervous about it. So it is a different approach. And really what I'm asking you tonight is, do you like the new approach of the Conservative Party? Is it enough to clinch your votes? And if you think, wow, I don't recognise this lot, they're brand new, it's terribly exciting, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or if you think, no, please, I want to go back to the days of Thatcher, I can't bear it, well, then you can text me on 84850, or perhaps you think it's just the same old Tories dressed up in a different style, and then you can tweet using the hashtag Farage on LBC, at LBC. You can, of course, watch the show live on Facebook. Has this manifesto launched today of the Conservatives been a success? It's a new look, it's a new style. Does it convince you? Craig in York, are you, and Yorkshire, of course, was where she launched this manifesto today. Are you convinced, Craig?
I'm not, Nigel. To echo kind of what you said earlier, for me, as a kind of a classical liberal, if you like, or a neoliberal,
yes.
as they fashion themselves as classical liberals, obviously, it seems to me to be alerts to the left. What Conservative Party would introduce? Death taxes, price fixing in the labour market and in the energy market, threats of other tax rises, protectionist policies, British jobs for British workers, that slogan.
Yes, and just to pick up there, Craig, so if you employ somebody from outside the European Union, the employer will have to pay £2,000 a year for the privilege of employing a skilled worker from somewhere else in the world, which has surprised people, Craig, has it not?
Well, precisely. The EU is a protectionist racket, and it appears to me that the Conservatives, pandering to some of the popularity of Mr Corbyn, are lurching to the left along with him, which, of course, for me, Corbyn's even further left, so I'll still have to vote Conservative. But it is a disappointment to me that perhaps the economically liberal part of politics in Britain has completely vaporised.
Yes, I have to say, I think it's 5.2 million now people in this country who are small business owners or sole traders, and for them, there isn't really much good news here at all, is there?
No, I don't think there is. It's a great shame. I mean, I know Germany's still got a kind of a liberal, economically liberal part of their politics, but it's a shame that we don't anymore. I think Conservative MEPs, for example, Daniel Hannan, quite traditional on the economic liberal side of things, and I think he, in particular, has been quite quiet on the Conservative manifesto.
Yeah,
probably for good reason.
I mean, Craig, are you normally a Conservative voter?
Well, I'm actually only 22, so I'm a strange kind of a millennial because, of course, most of my generation will be voting for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
So to say that I'm a usual Conservative voter wouldn't be quite true because I haven't voted in many general elections at all. But when I have voted, it's either been for the Conservatives or in fact for UKIP when it was a European issue.
Yeah. So are you left confused, Craig?
Yeah. Frankly, yeah. I mean, I enjoy politics. I enjoy economics. But what I've read about what the right should be in economics, and really what I subscribe to, is not what the Conservatives are currently standing for.
So it's too much big state, Craig. It's too much, as you say, price setting, fixing, slightly protectionist. Anything good in it, Craig? Go on, try.
Try. I think some of the towards Brexit, I think Theresa May will be better on Brexit than Jeremy Corbyn would be. There's some stability in that. I think that she set out a plan which I imagine has actually been rather influenced by yourself, which she, if she pursues it, would be good in terms of getting a positive outcome, and one that's clear in anticipation, clear in aim, unlike I imagine what Jeremy Corbyn would have, because he's clearly very split on the issue. He campaigned against the EU for all his life and been forced to campaign and remain because of his position as leader of the party. So
no, there was quite a lot here, Craig, that I recognise from the manifesto launch that I did in 2015 when I was leading UKIP. I mean, bringing back grammar schools, scrapping the tolls on the Severn Bridge, and even talking about Brussels bureaucrats. So they've gone down a very UKIP-y route on that stuff. Plus, of course, the pledge, and we'll discuss that later in the programme, to reduce immigration to tens of thousands. And what they've done, Craig, here is they want to sound like UKIP on that stuff, and on the economic stuff, they're actually going directly for the Labour vote. So they're trying to go for both those groups of voters, whilst at the same time, on the social care costs, which I guess we'll come to in a minute, I think they're assuming, Craig, that the pensioners are just going to vote for them anyway.
And despite this, all the social care costs, the welfare costs, everything goes up anyway. So for me, in summary, I think it's, as you say, increase in the size of the state, increase in public expenditure. The government already spends 40% of our national income. Isn't that too much already?
Craig, you are a classical Liberal. I thank you very much for your call. And I go to Hazel in Sandhurst next. Hazel, good evening. What do you make of the New Look Tory party?
Hi, Nigel. Great to talk to you. Love the show. And my only complaint is that you're only on for an hour.
Right. Well. That aside, Hazel, what do you make of this manifesto?
Well, I was going to vote Tory only because of the Brexit.
Yes.
I'm really a UKIPper.
Yes.
And that's where my heart lies. Mm-hmm. I definitely won't be voting for Theresa May now. I think she shot herself in the foot.
Yeah.
The social care package for me. I was born in the 50s. And I lived in a two-bed council house with my 6 sisters and my parents. I slept in a cot till I was 5. Times were hard, and I've worked hard all my life. I now own my own home, which I hope to pass on to my daughter and grandchildren. And with this plan that she's got now, I think, well, I don't know what's going to happen to me, and it sounds like the government are just taxing me for being ill and then dying, basically.
Does it? I mean, does this really feel like a death tax to you, Hazel? Is that what you think?
Yes, it does, very much, yeah.
I guess the counter-argument, Hazel, is that we still have a deficit running at just over £50 billion a year. If you're listening, Shadow Chancellor McDonnell, that's what it is. And I guess the argument is, Hazel, we have an ageing population. How on earth else can we possibly pay for the care of an ageing society? That's the argument they'll put.
Well, why are we or why are the Tories so hell-bent on paying so much foreign aid?
Well, now that's interesting, because one of the things that was very clear in the manifesto is she is maintaining David Cameron's proudest achievement, namely that we spend more on foreign aid than any other Western country in the world, and it will stay at 0.7% of
Which
GDP.
I'm livid about.
Which you're livid about. Right, so you would say, cut foreign aid. I've no doubt you'd say, stop giving money to the EU.
Definitely, I was a Brexiter, a very proud one as well.
And then we could be a little bit kinder to people like you, who've come from relatively modest backgrounds and now own your own home. So, Hazel, you're very angry about this. So, I mean, has Theresa May actually lost your vote today?
Yes, definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very
Because in the area that I live, it'll definitely be Tory, I should think, that will get in. And, so really I've got a wasted vote, but I'm going to go with my heart and vote UKIP. Right,
OK. Hazel, thank you very much. Well, we've had a couple of long extended phone calls and both people really unhappy. One, a young Thatcherite, basically, that wanted to see more free market, less big state, and Hazel saying she's worked damned hard all her life, and what she worries about now is long-term care. Even living in her own home could see much of her savings disappear. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. So the Tory manifesto was launched today by Theresa May up in Halifax, and it is definitely a very different look to the Conservative Party. Very much more control of things by the state, including pricing of energy and things like that. And for Thatcherites, they're dismayed, but she says that this is a manifesto for mainstream Britain. So she's putting herself in economic terms very much at the centre, but very, very UKIP-y on immigration and Europe. And that's pretty much where we are. So who wrote the manifesto? This is interesting. Ben Gummer was in charge of writing the manifesto, and he's been a Conservative MP in Suffolk for some years. He was last year in the referendum a fanatical pro-Remainer. And the morning after Brexit, he wrote, "I'm feeling sick to the pit of my stomach about the impact this will have on jobs across the country." And here, 11 months later, he is now the author of a pro-Brexit manifesto. Isn't career politics a wonderful, wonderful thing? And your messages coming in. I'm sorry, but social care in old age was never part of the welfare state. If you have the money, you can pay for your own care, and if you have less than £100,000, then it's free. Sounds pretty fair to me, says David Addlestone. OK, there is a strong counterpoint of view. Hazel, before the break, said she worked hard all her life. She owns her own property. She wants to leave it to her children. After all of your anti-May calls, I will still be voting May, despite being a long-term Labour supporter. That comes from Bristol. And from Southampton, Kathy says, I'm going to vote Conservative because she's promised Brexit and she's the right one to take us forward. And on Twitter, Billy says to me, Theresa May lost my vote today. Work hard and pay for your care. Scrounge all your life and it's all free. So it is social care costs that are bringing out much of the emotion on this. I wonder what Kumar in Ealing has to say about this manifesto and the new look Tory party.
Yes, good evening, sir. Somebody once said it's the economy, stupid, that all elections are won or lost on. And in that regard, I'd like to make three brief points. One on the public finances, secondly on the triple lock, and the third on social care.
It's all yours. It's all yours. It's all yours. The LBC airwaves are yours, Kumar.
OK. Between 2010 and 2016, George Osborne borrowed more than all previous governments in the history of Parliament over 350 years.
Yes.
Doesn't anybody point that out? I know you pointed out, but you don't describe it with the significance that it's due, number one.
Well, Kumar, I did try. In the leaders' debate in 2015, when I was head-to-head with Cameron, I said for all your claims to be responsible, you have doubled the national debt in the space of 5 years. But nobody picked it up or debated it.
Can I respond? And not only that, not in one single year did Osborne meet his financial targets. Number two, he promised to balance the budget by the end of the Parliament. He failed. So why should we trust the Tories now?
Well, Kumar, and again, let's get the facts right here. In 2010, they promised we would have a balanced budget in the financial year 2014-15, and we didn't. And now they're promising us that it'll be balanced by 2025, and I'm not sure I believe them, Kumar.
Precisely. And but my question is that given that you and Alex Hammond are probably the two most distinguished politicians in the last 25 years, why haven't you brought this to bear on the Tory Parliament?
Kumar, as I say, I did my absolute best in those leaders' debates back in 2015. It was very difficult because all the other parties were saying... they were all saying austerity, 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 as if the Tories had cut everything. And I kept saying, no, we're not living in austerity. We are still living way beyond our means. And I tried like crazy to get a proper debate going on this. And I'm afraid Osborne and Cameron won the election by the press telling everybody that actually they were running a very responsible budget, and they're just not. So I've tried, and right at the moment, just for some reason, people simply aren't interested. I mean, I would say this, that given, and you are quite right, it's a remarkable way of putting it, isn't it, that Osborne borrowed more than governments had done for the previous 250 years.
That's all you need to say. That's all you need to say.
Yeah, okay. Well, if I go back into frontline politics, Kumar, I'll take you on as a spin doctor, okay? Because you're very, very good at this.
Okay. A second point I'd like to make about the double or triple lock, okay?
Yes.
Some 30 years ago, in the 80s, okay, there were roughly 15 people in work providing the taxes to provide the pensions for every pensioner. It was about 1 million in those days. Today, that 15 is now down to 5, and the number of pensioners is from 1 up to about 5 million. In 10 years' time, the baby boomers who in the 80s were joining the workforce, they're going to be retiring. So we're going to have a 3-to-1 ratio. So you've got basically 4 alternatives. Either you increase the taxes on the 3, or you reduce the benefits of the 1. Alternatively, you have to have an immigration policy, which clearly you don't have in UKIP, but what one would have thought that you increase the 3 to 5, and by the grace of God, I've welcomed these 4 million immigrants we've had over the last 20 years.
Well, Kumar, hang on. I mean, we can, of course. I mean, there is an argument that says that the way you deal with an ageing population is through mass immigration. I've heard that argument many, many times before. There is one slight problem with it, and that is that immigrants get old too, don't they?
Mr. Farage, not mass, but balanced immigration. I'm not calling for mass immigration.
Okay.
I'm calling for balanced immigration. You've got to. Why do you think Merkel has allowed 1 million immigrants in? Because they're mostly young, they're mostly men, and they're going to work, and they're going to provide the pension. Because that ratio of 3-to-1 in Germany, that's coming to 1-to-1.
But let's, Kumar, and we could talk all night. Let's get back to this manifesto and your criticisms of it.
Third point, social care. She's totally flopped on that, and I think it's disgusting because I consider myself middle class, and yet she squeezed the middle class. Osborne says we're all in it together. Hell, we are. Forgive my language. I once worked for a Tory cabinet minister, and he said there are 4 types of Tories. There are landed gentry Tories, business Tories, economic Tories, and One Nation Tories. I do believe, actually, that May and John Major are One Nation Tories. But my point is this. What are we going to do about our ageing population? Because they deserve better.
No. You raise a very, very good point. And there is, and you're one of them, you use the word disgusting. There is quite a bit of disgust out there, I think. Kumar, does this make you less inclined to go and vote Conservative on June the 8th?
I would never... Look, I'm a capitalist by instinct.
Yes.
I'm a socialist by conscience. So I like to make money, but I also believe in paying taxes. But can I ask a final question of you, sir?
Go on.
Okay. Given that you're one of the few turkeys that have voted for Christmas...
Yes.
And post-Brexit, what are you going to do wake up Boxing Day?
Well, you may have seen I was busy yesterday in the European Parliament with Mr Juncker, and I want to oversee the Brexit process as much as I can because the action is all going to be in Brussels. It's not going to be in Westminster. And my view, Kumar, if you're asking me, is that I spent 25 years fighting to get this referendum. We won this referendum. If Mrs May delivers Brexit, I will be happy that my career in frontline politics is finished. If Mrs May delivers a fudged or half Brexit, then I would have to put myself back into the front lines. Kumar, thank you for your very good, interesting and informative call. Luke in Ascot, how do you feel about this manifesto, Luke?
Hi, I feel that it's a true manifesto. A lot of people are annoyed about it, but people usually only get annoyed when they're faced with facts, as you probably know with your career in politics. But I just wanted to raise my point that you made about the borrowing of the UK government. In fact, although you're looking at it as a numbers point of view, yes, numbers-wise, we've borrowed more than any other government previously. In percentage of GDP, it's one of the lowest. It's actually only about 3.5% of GDP. So when the economy and GDP is growing, obviously you can borrow more money, and that's why it looks more and worse than it is, when actually it's not as big as Labour has had before. So, for example,
Labour, yes. I mean, OK, Labour's got out of control, but that was because we bailed out the banks, wasn't it?
No, even back in the 70s, so for example, when Callaghan was in office, he borrowed 7% of GDP, or even, I know it was post-war, but we borrowed 15% of GDP. What I'm saying is people look at numbers rather than the actual...
Yeah. Luke, I understand what you're saying, but here's the real point. If you promise in your 2010 manifesto that by the end of that Parliament there will not be an annual deficit, and if you then make the same promise again in 2015, and you've made in the first 2 years very little progress towards it, is it actually credible in a third manifesto to say in a few years' time we will have eliminated the deficit? That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, no, it's not, and the same with the immigration. I'll believe it when I see it. And just to make a point that I'm actually a member of the Labour Party. I paid to be a member of the Labour Party. And my original point was that even though I'm a paying member, I will vote for Conservatives because I cannot have Jeremy Corbyn as leader.
Right, so you're voting, so you're a paid-up Labour member, but Corbyn is not right to be Prime Minister in your view?
It can't be. I think we're going to get through Brexit, vote Tories in this time, and then after Jeremy Corbyn resigns, which he will have to surely at the end of the election loss, then hopefully we'll get a credible leader, and I'll be able to...
OK, fine. Luke, very interesting. I'm fascinated to hear all your opinions on this, whether you're a traditional Tory who feels upset. Maybe this manifesto is switching you from Labour to the Conservatives. I don't know. On Facebook, John says, not happy with the Tory manifesto, but it has to be the tough route, and to vote Tory to kill off the Labour Socialist Party. Craig says the Tory manifesto is vaguely better than the Lib Dem offering and just ahead of Labour. Doesn't sound like Craig's too enthused with this general election so far. And Helena says, stop using older people to get money out of them. It's just not on. On Twitter, Tories ought to be a little concerned about the reaction on LBC to their manifesto pledges on charges to pensioners. That's what Moses says. Well, Moses, maybe the calculation is this, that they actually do have to get the deficit down somehow, and that wealthier pensioners who've got property, assets, savings of over £100,000, or perhaps a lot more than £100,000, they may have calculated, do you know what? They're going to vote for us anyway. They're going to vote for us anyway. So why don't we use this manifesto economically to go for Labour voters, and in terms of Brexit to go for UKIP voters? And that, I think, must be the calculation. That's my view. You're listening to a Nigel Farage show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. Well, one by one, we're going through each party's manifesto as they are launched. Immigration has been a massive issue in British politics over the course of the last few years. And if you remember, in 2010, David Cameron pledged that the Conservative government would reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. They repeated the pledge in 2015, and it was rumoured that they were going to repeat that pledge in this general election. Yesterday, there was a quite astonishing intervention to really try and get her to change her mind. And it came from George Osborne. Remember him? The one that resigned after Brexit. He was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, now the editor of the Evening Standard. And he launched a really scathing, I think, attempt to get her to change policy. He said it remains a mystery why the Prime Minister is going to recommit her party to reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. She does not need to do this. It is politically rash. It is economically illiterate, and she was not the author of this pledge. David Cameron made it in opposition. And he went on to say that in private, the members of Cameron's cabinet didn't believe in it and never thought it would happen. Well, despite Mr. Osborne's attempt, she has recommitted a Conservative government to aim to reduce the annual net figure on migration to tens of thousands. I won't say anything on that, but I will ask you to ring in. Do you believe them? Back to the callers. Claire in Richmond. How do you view this manifesto, Claire?
Hello, Nigel.
Hi.
First and foremost, I don't believe the Tories. But I don't believe their manifesto. I was going to vote Tory purely on the referendum for Brexit, and I felt that she would be the best person to take us into negotiations with the EU. But I looking at their, as you say, their general elections in their previous ones, it's just continuous lies. So, and the thing about immigration is the reason I'm ringing really is because of the social care aspect.
Yes.
Immigration does come into it. My mother, in the last year, has become very, very ill. My parents own their own home. My dad worked till he was 73. He was a plasterer. He didn't sit in an office. He did a physical job. My mother started out as a nurse. She ended up in social care, and she worked her whole life. They were encouraged by Margaret Thatcher's department to, buy their council houses, which they did.
As
my
many
mother
did.
didn't want to do that, but my father did. He wanted to, because they were encouraged to leave something for their children, because their parents left them nothing, because they were absolutely desperately poor. There wasn't anything to live. You couldn't own your own home. You rented, and that's what you did. So my parents have absolutely... My dad didn't give up work till he was 73.
Right, so they own their own home.
Yeah.
And you fear that what's going to happen...
Well, she has care. So in the last year, she's become very, very ill. And she's been stuck in hospital. I also worked in social care. I kind of know all the ins and outs of how it works. And, and I'm not going to say who I worked for, but, I managed to get her out and get her home. They have their own home, but they have no savings. So they're not wealthy, but they ploughed all their money into having this property. And I would say they just about managed to pay their bills every single month. They will be means tested, and on that means test, they will get the winter fuel allowance. So they're not rich by any shape or form.
But
she is having...
But they have a property asset, yeah?
They do have a property asset. I've spoken to my mother today, and even she agrees that there should be a contribution to care. Absolutely, because people are living longer. I've got an intelligent parents. They're not stupid. The point is that all of her carers are foreign. Every single one of them. There isn't one English carer coming through the door. And I will hand on heart tell you they are wonderful girls that come through that door. But I know how much her bill is because I've seen it. My mother doesn't have to contribute at the moment, but I know how much that bill is because it's about 700 quid a month. That's what it is.
Yep.
The point is they're there for 15 minutes each time they come. They're supposed to be there an hour, but they're there. But we don't complain because we don't pay for that. However, if my mother was having to pay for that and it had to come out of
then you change the relationship, don't you, with the carer in quite a big way? Yeah.
You do, because at that point we would then be saying, well, actually, we are paying you for 1 hour of work, which is clearly what she was assessed to have right at the beginning when she came home and she was assessed. So, that money isn't going to go very far.
So, Claire, what would...
They're on about 9 quid an hour.
What would your mother consider to be a fair contribution?
Well, I've spoken to her today and she has said, if Conservatives get in, then they will have to do what the Conservatives say. However, I'm doing a postal vote for them, and I have encouraged my parents today not to vote for Conservatives.
Right.
I think it's disgusting. My mum gave her life. She is crippled today.
No, Claire.
And all her health problems are because of the job that she did all them years. There was no hoisting, there was no equipment.
Claire, I understand.
How I see it.
Claire from Richmond, I understand the passion, and you put your case about your parents' situation very, very clearly. I thank you. Caroline in Epping, how do you feel about the social care costs that could be imposed upon people?
Well, I'm quite nervous about the call anyway, but also I think I'm not going to be very popular because I actually don't find it so troublesome. I don't find that the direction that she's taken us in is the wrong one.
Okay.
A couple of points. On the international assistance, I think that we have a duty in the world. We view ourselves in Britain as good, generous people, and I know a lot of good, generous people, and we need to be out there leading the world in showing commitment for what really are third world problems. You know, we have a lot of problems here, but there are people starving.
So you're perfectly comfortable with the foreign aid budget and us being the biggest contributor from any country in the West?
I think we are staying by our commitments that we made, and, you know, we're recognised for that. And I think what people don't understand is that there's probably a lot of goodwill and probably business and a lot of other things that are coming to us because of our involvement in other countries. However, having said all that, I don't believe it's well controlled. I don't believe it's going in the right direction to the right people. I think, having spoken to a lot of people that I know, they do not have a problem with giving 0.07% or whatever it is of our contribution if it was going to the right places.
But isn't it also, Caroline,
aid for development?
It's an arbitrary target. So you get these ridiculous stories where with a month to go, they've got to spend more money. Otherwise, it's not going to reach 0.7%.
No, I do understand it's an arbitrary target. I'm not saying that the whole thing doesn't need to be looked at, and that's a case for another show, I think, in its own. But that's just one point I'd like to make. That I do think we need to be. We have not done great things in the world in the last 20 years. I think we should be making a contribution towards reversing some of that.
Okay.
My other point is I don't understand why means testing for the wealthy is not a good idea. When I worked in the city, I was getting child benefit. I didn't need it. I tried to give it back. I couldn't. I don't understand why people earning over a certain amount, you know, the millionaires need the winter allowance. What I am concerned about is that the whole ethos of the party, and what she said today was, if you are healthy, if you have a modicum of intelligence, if you are blessed with good health, you should be contributing. You should not expect benefits. They are a privilege. You should be contributing to help those that genuinely need the help. And to do that, we need to be looking at things like means testing. Why all children are getting meals, I don't know. I can give my child a lunch for £1, for £2. I'm on benefits myself. I don't begrudge that, okay? Because there are other people who don't.
Yeah, I mean, your point, Caroline, is that if a benefit is universal, if everybody gets it, it's not really a benefit, is it? So okay.
And you know, I've heard a lot of people today coming on saying, I should get this, I should get that. I've not heard anybody coming on saying, what can I do for the UK? What can I do for my community? What can I contribute? I'm well. I've been blessed with intelligence. I have a good job. I've worked all my life. I inherited nothing. I inherited no house. I've raised my children. I've raised my children in the expectation that they will be able to look after themselves and given them what I hope is a good education. I don't expect them to survive off me passing them the house.
No, but a lot of people, Caroline, a lot of people do feel strongly about that, don't they? A lot of people say...
Please don't misunderstand me. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. You were just asking for people's opinion.
Yeah.
My opinion is you should work hard, but life is cruel. Okay, people were comparing why not cancer, why dementia. You cannot legislate for every disease. You cannot legislate for that. If I can take out insurance for heart attacks and other things, I do that. Okay, right. I do that for my children. I try and take care of the things I can take care of. Pensions. I speak to so many people who have no pension. Okay, now I put away, thank God, because of the work that I was in, which was in the city, I put away my pension from day one. Therefore, I do have some comfort. But if I'm sick, then I expect to pay for what life's thrown at me. I don't expect some stranger that I don't know to pick up my tab.
No.
So what I'm trying to say is, I just would like to hear a bit more from people.
So you're really saying, Caroline, that you're saying that we should think a bit more about what we can do for our country rather than what our country can do for us.
Absolutely.
Get it? No. You made that point very, very clearly and very well, and I thank you. It is the family's responsibility to look after their elderly, not the government's or the state's, says Luciano from Bath. Theresa May has just lost my vote after her policies against pensioners, says Carol in Poole. Hi, Nigel. Can people stop wittering about what the Conservatives did not deliver from their 2010 manifesto? No party ever delivers on their manifestos. Well, that may be true, but it is interesting, isn't it, that when you make the same promise in a third manifesto, I think people have a right to start to begin to ask a question of whether they actually believe it. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. You still have a chance to register for tickets for my roadshow at lbc.co.uk. I'll be live next week On Monday, I'll be in Manchester. Tuesday, I'll be in Birmingham. Wednesday in Newcastle. And Thursday in Glasgow. And you can be part of that discussion. That's the Nigel Farage Roadshow all next week, only on LBC, lbc.co.uk, if you want to come and join those studio audiences. So it's the big launch of a Tory manifesto. It's a very different look Tory party. It's a new approach. Have they got it right? Have they secured your vote? Sebastian in Barnes, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think this marks kind of a break from the kind of solid conservative they're coming out today, saying that's what her manifesto represents. In fact, I think it represents interventionism. I think it represents. When we first saw that with the energy, the
Yes.
to put a cap on those energy prices, I thought that was a mistake. I think the way you encourage those prices to come down to competition. I mean, I am a paid Conservative member, and do I have it?
Sebastian, that phone line is absolutely rubbish. We're going to come back to you. I'm going to go to Joe in Manchester. Joe, are you impressed with this Tory manifesto?
I'm impressed how evil some people can be.
Evil?
Yeah, I think it is evil. I mean, maybe I'm talking from a personal perspective. My dad has had dementia for a while, but I find it absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I know it's a one-off case, but the Duke of Westminster is avoiding $4.6 billion in inheritance tax, but the social care budget has been slashed by $4.6 billion. And the NHS deficit is, what, $2.3 billion?
Well, I mean, Joe, if we talk about money, that has been spent on public services over the last, since 2010, since Cameron became Prime Minister, I mean, they haven't exactly been slashing and burning, have they?
Well, I mean, 700 billion borrowed, is it?
They borrowed a lot of money, yeah, they really have. They really have.
I mean, maybe I'm sidetracking, but how come there's issues with the Labour Party finding 50 billion, but 700 billion...
Well, do you know what, Joe? Joe, you've just put your finger on it. One of the biggest nonsenses in this whole election campaign, Joe, is parties make promises and they're asked, how are you going to pay for it? And they say a penny on this or whatever, when actually, no one's balanced the books for goodness knows how long anyway. So I think you're absolutely right about that. How do you feel about, better off pensioners making a contribution, even if they're treated at home?
Well, I mean, define better off. I mean...
Well, they have done. They have done. They've said if you're worth £100,000, if you've got property value or savings worth more than £100,000, you've got to start paying a contribution.
Okay, well, I live in Manchester, and the average house price is around 120,000 for a two-bedroom terrace.
Yes.
So that is, I'm assuming, over 80% of all homeowners. What is the point in having a home?
Well, there is an argument, Joe, and somebody else made it earlier on text. There is an argument that if this is what's going to happen to you, what's the point of saving at all? Because if you're worth less than £100,000, the state will pick up the tab. I mean, it is actually potentially quite a big disincentive for people to save and buy their own homes.
Oh, exactly. I mean, just to go back to the dementia issue, my mother is my father's carer, and that has allowed me to go to university without knowing that she would be on the breadline. She'd be in poverty. She wouldn't know where the next meal is coming from, so to speak. So that's allowed me to, I feel, get a proper career. I'll be able to contribute back to the system.
Yeah. No, I get that. And by the way, Joe, on health, they are saying that they're going to increase spending on the NHS by £8 billion in real terms over the next 5 years, OK? And I do wonder sometimes whether we don't perhaps get to the heart of this problem, and that is that our population is going up by 500,000 people every year. It's a lot more healthcare, Joe, we have to provide, isn't it?
Well, it is, but when people talk about having good British values, wasn't the NHS... I don't think the NHS had a sort of subordinate clause in it saying, well, that's assuming we can look after them. We've got enough money for wars, we've got enough money to bail out the banks. Why don't we have enough money to pay for people who have contributed all their life?
Joe, it's a very strong point. You've made it very well, and I thank you. Anthony says on Facebook, manifestos are best filed under fiction. Lucinda says, So, some Brexit supporters aren't going to vote Tory now because of a social care policy and don't mind risking leaving the Brexit negotiations in Jeremy Corbyn's hands. Jackie says, too many people think other people's taxes should keep them while they sit at home doing nothing. Nigel, my pension is £10,000 per year. I can't get any extra benefits, and it simply isn't enough to live on. I am not a rich pensioner, and I've paid national insurance for the last 44 years. And that, I think, is the general flavour we're getting from older people who are contacting this show. They feel that what's happened today is going to rob them of many, many years of hard work and thrift and saving. If you disagree with that, let me know. And I know some people say, well, actually, isn't it fair enough? Because how can we, with an ageing population, how can we pay for everything? Sebastian in Barnes, you're back, I hope, with a phone line that works.
Yes, hopefully.
So the last bit I got was you're a paid-up Tory member.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, but you're not happy with this manifesto.
No, I mean, we first saw this kind of break from free market belief. We saw that with the energy price cap, that pledge there. And I think that was a really, really bad idea. I also think the decision to, fine these companies £2,000 for every, the workers that they hire from abroad, I also think that's a really bad decision. I believe that because I think that it restricts businesses' employment pools and skills pools. And I think
I mean, the idea, Sebastian, I mean, the whole argument, those of us that have really pushed the immigration argument hard, and no one's pushed it harder than me, the whole argument is it's not about stopping skilled workers coming in from the rest of the world. It was about the unlimited supply of unskilled labour coming in from the European Union.
Well, yeah, that's a very fair point, but why then is the Conservative Party pushing this as part of their manifesto?
I don't know.
Anti-business.
I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. It seems to me, Sebastian, and I'm going to put it to you as a Tory party member, it seems to me that if you're one of the 5.2 million small businesses or sole traders in this country, this manifesto offers you very little at all.
Well, I think actually, I mean, look, yes, that is true. I think the manifesto itself does a very great disservice to small businesses. But I will stick with that point, that I think it is not the government's responsibility to tell businesses whom they can employ, what kind of pools they can employ from. Yep. I think that's not the government's duty. I think the government should stay out of businesses' decisions in terms of their employment. I think there is an argument to be said that, yes, there are people that come to this country that abuse our services, but I don't think that's reflective of the overwhelming majority of people who do come. And if we want to promote that, and if we want to say, look, we're on your side, then why are we telling businesses, we're going to put a fine on you for hiring workers from abroad? I think that's the most stupid idea I've ever heard, really, on that kind of topic.
Well, this is really damning stuff coming from a paid-up Conservative Party member. I mean, I assume, Sebastian, you're still voting Conservative, or does this all sort of make you want to abstain?
Well, no, I will vote Conservative. I think if you compare it with Jeremy Corbyn, I think his policies, I think it's terrible. And I am a very strong Conservative. I will always vote for the Conservative Party. I think there are parts of Theresa May's policies that I agree with, but I think there are parts of it that I really strongly disagree with.
Sebastian, I'm going to have to stop you because time is moving on. Got to get some more callers in. So a disenchanted Conservative, Sebastian, still going to vote Conservative, but doesn't like the move away from free market capitalism. David in Wrexham, how do you feel?
Hi.
Good evening.
Well, I feel quite angry actually because, to be honest, I grew up in Wales. I was born in '62 in that, so it was kind of quite a poverty upbringing. I was the first one in the family to go to university. I met my wife, and we've worked basically 6 days every week, all of our married life, putting money away. We've managed to get together a house of 300,000, which is our legacy to our kids. We thought invest in bricks and mortar. Yep. And basically what's going to happen is we're having the rug pulled from under us. How do I tell my kids that you work hard all your life, and in the old days they said you work hard, you get somewhere, and you get a bit of money and your property. My kids now will look and they'll think, well, what's the point?
Why bother saving? Why bother being thrifty? Why not spend it all down the pub, and then later on the state picks up the tab? By the way, that wasn't an advert to everybody. David, are you less inclined to vote Conservative right now?
Put it this way: if you were standing now, I'd be like many millions of people. I'd be voting for you. I've got to carefully think about this. Corbyn is a non-entity. Theresa May now is her halo is dropped.
David, I'm going to have to let you go and leave you to this complicated decision. And my last message of the evening is, good evening, Nigel. The Tory pledges are well thought out and will work. People want something for nothing, says Ashley in Beaconsfield. Well, judging by the calls, the texts, the tweets, I would say from LBC listeners, it's not been a great day for the Conservative Party, though perhaps in some ways a brave one. It just on the economics doesn't feel like the Conservative Party that I've known all my life. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back on Monday at 7, live from Manchester, on the Road Show. Coming up at 10, it's Majid Nawaz. Up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you, and we're going to continue this conversation. Massive reaction on the phones into LBC on this issue.